Greetings and welcome to Fanfiction Reader. I'm thrilled to bring fanfiction to life through audio. I put a lot of effort into these readings, so if you're enjoying the journey, please consider giving the video a thumbs up and subscribing to the channel. Your support means a lot. Now, let's dive into the story.
Chapter 21-21021. Come on, let's burn New York to ashes. Chinatown. Google search reading. When Rorschach returned home, his aunt was still staring at the decoration of the restaurant. He took out his shoulder bag and packed the Katachan saber and plasma pistol. Rorschach changed into a set of clothes and military boots. He took out a stack of banknotes from the bag under the bed and prepared to leave. But before leaving, Rorschach sent a text message to his aunt. He explained that he was going to do a part-time job. Before his aunt replied to the message, he turned off his phone and threw it on the bed. Rorschach walked out of the apartment and began to prepare. Facing the backbone of an entire gang, the proven killing skills and the powerful plasma pistol were enough to deal with it. However, Rorschach still needed some auxiliary means to prevent them from escaping and dispersing. So, when Rorschach purchased more and more things, he had to buy a mountaineering backpack again as a container. The purchase was over. Rorschach walked on the street and suddenly felt hungry. He looked around, found a roadside stand selling hot dogs, started eating like crazy. In a short time, the stall owner's speed of making hot dogs could hardly keep up with Rorschach's speed of eating. He ate 15 hot dogs in a row. Rorschach paid the bill under the stall owner's awe-inspiring expression. Then Rorschach turned to leave, but before he took a few steps, a pleading voice suddenly came from behind. "Excuse me, sir, can you please take a look at this missing person notice?" Rorschach raised his eyebrows and turned his head to look back. "Mike? A Rorschach?" The person standing in front of him turned out to be the apprentice and tool man of the delicious Chinese restaurant, Black Mike. Because Rorschach today is completely different from before, so Mike didn't recognize him at first. Until Rorschach spoke, Mike gradually overlapped the Rorschach in his memory with the Rorschach in front of him. "Oh my god, young people in puberty are simply a miracle of life," Mike subconsciously exclaimed. "Maybe, Mike, is there still no news about your brother?" With a smile on his face, Rorschach took the flyer from Mike's hand and asked politely. At the same time, he looked down at the flyer. It seems that in order to reduce costs, the flyer was made very roughly. There is only a black and white photo and contact information. The photo shows a black boy with missing front teeth. The left hand raised and the ear was born with a defective ear. Maybe it's the defectiveness, or the bright smile on his face. In short, the little boy is impressive at first glance. There is no news. It's like he evaporated from the face of the earth. Mike's eyebrows were full of anxiety and haggardness. He smiled bitterly and said, "My mother is about to have a mental breakdown, so I have to stand up, but Jerry has been missing for so long." Mike didn't finish his words, but Rorschach also understood what he meant. Rorschach nodded silently. He folded the flyer a few times and stuffed it into the shoulder bag on his chest. "Didn't you try to ask the media for help? You should have seen the recent big news, right? Now is a good time to let the media force the police to work hard. Why didn't you go?" But all the media were surrounded by those parents who published missing person notices. Mike shook his head and sighed helplessly. Those rich black and white people can go on the show to tell their warm stories, but for ordinary families like us from poor communities, many media can only publish a small missing person notice. It's better than nothing. After listening to Mike's words, Rorschach was speechless. He pondered for a moment and took out a small stack of bills from his pocket. That was the money left from shopping, 1,500 yuan. Rorschach kept 5 bills alone. He stuffed the remaining bills to Mike. Mike opened his mouth in surprise and his dark skin seemed to turn red. He refused repeatedly. "No, no, no, Rorschach, this is too much." "Mike, take it, just consider it as an advance payment of salary." Rorschach smiled and said, "Aunt is still waiting for her tool apprentice to go back to work." "Thank you." Mike's eyes seemed to be a little wet. He choked, but forced himself to hold it back. "Thank you, I just don't know how to thank you. Finding Jerry is the best thank you. Don't say anything else. After all, friends need to help each other, don't they?" Rorschach answered seriously. Seeing that Mike no longer refused and carefully put away the money, Rorschach said hello to Mike, turned away. Next, he still had an important part-time job to do. Hell's Kitchen Baby Mall. As the third-generation leader of the sportswear gang, Fat Boy Bobby is not only like a huge wild boar in physique, even his style of doing things is quite similar. Greed is his eating instinct. Brutality is his reproductive desire. That's why he can control the entire gang. At least, it was like that a few days ago. Now, Fatty Bobby can only curl up his fat body in the dusty sofa. He eats frantically with elegant movements. He stares at the phone in front of him. He has been waiting for a call from the king of the underground, a call that can save his gang career, a call that can save his life. However, until the sweet tomato macaroni filled Fatty Bobby's huge stomach, the phone still didn't ring. Fatty Bobby gradually fell into despair and was in great pain. He understood instantly. The sportswear gang that once dominated New York has been abandoned. The gang empire of the king of the underground. He doesn't want to attract more attention from the public and the authorities. The sportswear gang must disappear, both physically and mentally. Waste. All a bunch of waste. At this moment, the plump fat on Fatty Bobby's cheeks kept shaking. Bang! He threw the can of tomato macaroni on the ground with a hideous face. Thick dust mixed with the red soup of macaroni. It was like a pool of broken red internal organs. Damn underground king. Damn New York Police Department. Damn New York citizens. I, Bobby, am the king of this city. King of New York. As time passed, Fat Bobby's eyes were bloodshot and he looked crazy. Even the fat all over his body was shaking violently. He seemed to have a mental breakdown forced by the huge pressure of reality. At this moment, Fat Bobby got up with difficulty. He moved his legs and rushed out of the room in the mall like a wild boar. Boom, boom, boom! The heavy footsteps attracted the attention of the gangsters downstairs. They raised their heads with different expressions and stared at Fat Bobby, who appeared on the stairs of the mall. I declare that tonight we are going to give New York City a big surprise. Staring at everyone with a pair of bloodshot eyes, Fatty Bobby slowly raised his hands and clenched them into fists. He yelled crazily, "Do you want to eat fresh food? Do you want to sleep with beautiful women? Do you want to walk freely under the sun? What if the police want you? What if you are abandoned by the king of the underground? Are we afraid? We are the gangs that rule New York. We still have a lot of weapons and ammunition. Come on, bring your guns and join my crazy party." Fat Bobby drooled, and his crazy state was like a mustache. However, his fierce speech did not resonate with anyone's emotions. The silent gang leaders looked at each other, a few inexplicable cold flashes in the depths of their eyes. At this moment, Fatty Bobby, standing on the stairs, gasped and sweated all over. He keenly discovered the undercurrent surging among the silent gang leaders. Fatty Bobby's fat face showed a crazy grin. Anyone willing to come to the party will share the gang funds in the warehouse. If you want, you can share the money now. After the party, if we have achieved results, the funds laundered in the overseas accounts can also be shared equally. Before Fatty Bobby finished speaking, the gang leaders, numbering nearly 40, all showed understanding smiles. Clap. The crisp sound of countless guns being loaded almost became a large area. Come on, let's burn this city to ashes. Hell's Kitchen after night falls. It seems to have entered another world. In the dark corners of countless buildings, men and women who have reached a deal, making unabashed happy sounds. Between the dilapidated streets, drug dealers carrying automatic rifles choose to set up stalls on the roadside. It seems to be to attract customers. Above the vehicles that have become mobile stalls, there are also strings of colorful small light bulbs hanging. It is both a hidden sign and a business atmosphere. Ragged homeless people, urban white-collar workers with heavy makeup, even students with childish faces are constantly appearing, joining the carefully selected shopping ranks. At the same time, chaos and order found a way to coexist peacefully and chose to fall together. This is the tip of the iceberg of Hell's Kitchen daily life. Hell's Kitchen, a paradise and holy place for criminals. Unlike the crowded streets outside, the deeper you go into the community of Hell's Kitchen, the appearance of the streets and buildings becomes more and more dilapidated. Even the lights dotted in the windows are getting fewer and fewer. After entering a more dilapidated street, even the lights disappeared, except for homeless people, or criminals with serious crimes. I'm afraid no one wants to live in a place without water and electricity. Baby Mall stands in such a dark community. Like a silent giant beast, this large supermarket that once nurtured generations of local residents of Hell's Kitchen is now completely abandoned. Even in the parking lot outside the door, patches of lush grass have sprouted as the rain has watered them. Shua shua shua, the half-man-high grass kept shaking, accompanied by the sound of friction. Rorschach, who was crawling forward cautiously, showed up. At this time, his head was tightly wrapped with a red scarf. His face was covered with a gas mask. He was also wearing a black waterproof coat. At the same time, a dark Catachan saber was held in Rorschach's hand. The glowing plasma pistol was hidden in his coat pocket to prevent exposure. There was no sign of electricity in the baby store. Only the occasional flashlight light flashed through the window and the noisy voices came out faintly. The situation inside was unexpectedly presented. The poor dwarf did not lie. This is the lair of the sportswear gang. Rorschach's eyes hidden behind the gas mask flickered slightly. The crawling movement became more cautious. A few minutes later, Rorschach quietly touched the front door of the store. He hid in the corner and raised his head slightly. He looked inside the mall through the dusty glass. Between a large number of abandoned shelves, a cleared space, about 30 Slavs were holding flashlights to clean their guns and load ammunition. Almost every one of them wore bulletproof vests. Some wore military helmets on their heads. Pistols, submachine guns, automatic rifles. There was even a heavy-fire machine gun on several boxes of ammunition. At the same time, grenades were taken out of the boxes and placed in front of everyone. From time to time, someone came forward to pick it up, hung it on his chest, showed off to his companions around him, and laughed heartily. What are they going to do? So much firepower is enough for a fierce street fight. Are they driven crazy by the New York police? Are they going to fight to the death? Rorschach carefully hid his figure. The eyes hidden behind the gas mask were full of doubts. However, just when Rorschach was about to sneak in from behind, a fanatical voice suddenly sounded from inside. It attracted his attention again. Brothers, are you ready? Hurrah, ready. Haha, I can't wait. Fat Boy Bobby, wearing an oversized bulletproof vest, stared with a pair of bloodshot eyes. He scanned back and forth in the dim light, and his subordinates were eager to fight. He was already crazy and couldn't help showing a twisted and hideous smile. Tomorrow morning the whole New York will be shocked. The whole country and even the whole world will be shocked. The damn king of the underground wants to hide? Wishful thinking. I, Fat Boy Bobby, will use the lives of countless New York citizens to overturn you. Even if the gang is completely destroyed and the federal investigation is launched afterwards. Those dirty deals will be exposed to the sun. King of the underground, you will also become a stray dog. Slavs will never admit defeat. Very good. I have distributed all the money in the warehouse to you. Fat Boy Bobby grinned with a flushed face. The fat on his cheeks was shaking with excitement. Now it's time for you to repay me. There is only one goal, that is to shoot and kill people. Do whatever you want. Do whatever you want. Before that, the smuggling ship has stopped at the port of the Hudson River. If everything goes well, you will go out to sea with me on the ship and share more wealth. Hurrah! Fat Boy Bobby raised his fist violently. He shook his arms desperately and kept shouting. Huh! At this moment, excited Fat Boy Bobby suddenly found a blue light ball the size of a human head flew over the shelf in the blink of an eye and flew in front of him. Bang! Chapter 22 Baby Massacre. Please collect and recommend. The plasma exploded instantly. Google search reading. The explosion of bright lightning completely overwhelmed Fat Boy Bobby. The extremely high temperature burned the body weighing 200 kilograms to ashes in an instant. Bang bang bang. At the same time, more plasma light balls spewed out from the dark corners. For a moment, it was like a roaring crazy thunderstorm. What is this? Ghost? Ball lightning? Mysteries that are clearly beyond human common sense. The gangsters present were in a state of shock. They roared, they shouted, but no one dared to raise their firearms to fight back. However, wait until Fat Boy Bobby's ashes are blown away by the wind. When it fell to the ground, someone reacted instantly. Unfortunately, it's too late. Countless plasma light balls overwhelmed everyone present. It even detonated grenades piled on the ground. Boom boom boom, the air seemed to tremble. The violent shock wave shattered all the glass in the baby mall, making a crackling sound. Right now, one was wearing a black waterproof coat. Her hair is wrapped in a red turban. A tall figure with a gas mask on his face slowly stepped out of the shadows. He faced the remaining flames and heat in the air, and the flashlight light kept flashing. The whole person feels like walking on the fresh streets after the rain. Stepped into this extremely bloody slaughterhouse. At this moment, countless pieces of broken flesh and blood mixed with human ashes. The ground is covered with potholes. Occasionally, there will be stumps and broken arms that are still twitching. Then he was stepped over by a tall silent figure. Staring at the extremely tragic scenes around him, Rorschach seemed to be used to it. Even a little discomfort emerged in my heart. He was also gradually drowned out by the sound of breathing echoing in the mask. This made him feel like he was back in the good days in the underground alleyways. However, even Rorschach was mentally prepared. I still underestimated the power of the plasma pistol again. It only took more than 10 seconds. More than 30 armed humans completely disappeared from the world. Although there is also the unexpected factor of grenade explosion. But this is the real battlefield. There are always surprises and surprises. The soles of Rorschach's shoes stepped on sticky flesh. Through the diffuse smoke, it was confirmed that there was no one alive in the entire scene. Rorschach hesitated. Still, he bent down and picked up the firearm that had not been blown to pieces and melted between flesh and blood. After simple screening by the simulator, there were only 18 firearms left that met the requirements. Absorbed into cooldown time. Increase cooling time, 18 hours. What a big loss. Rorschach couldn't help but mutter to himself. I deeply regret my reckless behavior just now. He originally wanted to sneak into the assassination by setting up a trap. It wasn't until the dead person made the other party aware, then used the powerful plasma pistol to solve the battle. However, the fat guy was obviously the gang leader. A crazy pep talk. While Rorschach was caught off guard, he also had no time to prepare. He could only use his plasma pistol to make a fool of himself. Try to stop these guys from breaking out of Hell's Kitchen and causing more casualties. The result: outstanding effect. At this moment, Rorschach, who was wearing a gas mask, took a deep breath, as if he remembered something. He turned around and searched his surroundings again. It's just that the scope is larger. Sure enough, he came out of several abandoned shelves that were knocked down by the blast wave. Easily found a dozen black packages. Opening the zipper, there were stacks of banknotes inside. This seems to be the life-saving money revealed in Fatty's words. Well, it's not a loss. Rorschach, who had no time to count them, picked up the black packages one by one, turned around and walked towards the door of Baby Mall. The loud noise of the explosion and the rising smoke will soon attract the police or criminals. As the culprit, Rorschach needs to stay away from the scene. However, just as Rorschach walks to the door of Baby Mall, when one foot has not yet stepped out of the threshold, yoo-hoo-hoo, a dark red short stick suddenly shot out from the dark corner. Sensing the danger, Rorschach dropped the package in his hand. The dark Katachan saber was raised in an instant. The blade is facing forward, blocking the way. Boom! With a soft sound, the short metal stick was cut in half by the sharp-edged Katachan saber. Rorschach's back bowed slightly and his muscles swelled. The soles of the military boots bit the ground hard. The whole person is ready for battle. At the same time, a slender figure wearing dark red leather armor also walked out of the shadows. The short stick in one hand danced slowly and groaned softly. Night Stalker? Rorschach narrowed his eyes and said in a low voice through the gas mask, "Don't mind your own business, it's just gang criminals who die here." Red Turban? I thought you were just a false character made up by the police to deal with the media. The night demon wearing a dark red mask listened intently. The short horns on its head shone slightly like a pair of devil's fangs. Hell's Kitchen is my territory, you've crossed the line and you shouldn't kill anyone. Before he finished speaking, the night demon rushed forward. The short stick in his hand seemed to have life and suddenly stretched a lot. The silver stick head attacked like a venomous snake, whipping Rorschach's head. HMPH. Rorschach snorted coldly from his gas mask. He didn't say much. He raised the Katachan saber in his hand slightly. The blade collided violently with the stick head, completely knocking the opponent away. However, it was such a short time. The night demon actually came to Rorschach quickly. The distance between the two sides was less than 1 meter. At the same time that the short stick in his hand was pulled back by the steel wire, one foot stomped on the ground, and the knee wrapped in leather armor hit Rorschach's abdomen. Rorschach's left hand clenched into a fist. It fell down with a bang, and almost at the same time hit the night demon's knee. Bam! The fist and leg intersected, making a dull collision sound. The huge reaction force also made the two men lean back slightly. In comparison, Rorschach's reaction was obviously faster. He immediately followed his subconscious habit. He took out his plasma pistol and shot the other party. But his instinct was forcibly controlled by reason. It also made Rorschach hesitate for a moment. However, the night demon in front of him seemed to have caught Rorschach's small flaw. He raised 1 foot high and kicked Rorschach's chest fiercely. Bang! Rorschach's strong body flew backwards in an instant and only landed heavily 3 meters away. Seeing that the other party was in a weak position, the night demon seemed to be slightly relieved. He shook the short stick with his palm. Just as he was about to move forward, he stopped and listened. At this moment, Rorschach pressed one of his palms on his chest. The expression on the face behind the mask became much colder. He slowly got up from the ground and twisted his head slightly. Rorschach didn't seem to have any intention of taking out the plasma pistol. Instead, he tore off his waterproof coat and threw it on the ground. At the same time, Rorschach actually held the Katachan saber in reverse. With the back of the saber facing outward, he spoke word by word. "Oh, Matthew Murdoch. If I don't beat you into a hospital bed, this matter's not over." Chapter 23-23023. When people go to jail, dogs die. Who are you? The identity is suddenly revealed. Google search reading. The shocked night demon subconsciously waved the short stick in his hand. The silver stick head is like a controlled dart. Pulled by the wire, it flew towards Rorschach's head. However, Rorschach remained silent and did not panic. In an instant, the Katachan saber in his hand was swung rapidly. The head of the stick flew off again. Then, Rorschach's military boot stamped hard on the ground. He leaned over and charged towards the night demon. Night Stalker did the same thing. He faced Rorschach and rushed forward. However, his body movements seemed to be no longer as free and easy as before. Every moment my hands and feet were wrapped in a restless mood. And as the distance between the two parties gets closer, got no response. The Night Demon seemed to be angry and raised his arm and punched out his fierce fist instantly. Bang! However, his attack was blocked by the already prepared Rorschach with his elbow. There was a dull sound. Bang! Then the back of Catachan's saber struck Night Demon on the shoulder. Even if the Night Demon is wearing a uniform and leather armor. However, the tyrannical power from Rorschach is obviously difficult to bear. Night Demon's body suddenly shook, teetering on the edge of collapse. At the same time, Rorschach's palm quickly stretched forward. He suddenly grabbed Night Demon's arm as he retracted his short stick and tried to fight back. Drink! Rorschach exhaled loudly and twisted his waist and abdomen. A powerful rear projection threw the Night Demon completely out. Boom! The Night Stalker knocked over countless abandoned shells. It landed heavily on the ground a few meters away, splashing countless dust and garbage. The eyes behind Rorschach's mask narrowed slightly. He seemed to have discovered the Night Demon's weakness. That is, the absolute strength brought by physical fitness is obviously not as good as his. In an instant, Rorschach took steps. Before Night Demon could recover from the physical pain, he once again rushed in front of Night Demon, who was trying to get up to fight. Rorschach grabbed the collar of the leather uniform. His legs and feet tensed hard, and the muscles all over his body continued to expand. Swish! Rorschach used centrifugal force to spin half a circle, then let go and throw it out instantly. The Night Demon has yet to recover from the heavy fall. It actually flew out again. Weaving his arms, Night Demon managed to control his body and still crossed the air. It hit a wall that was in disrepair. A dark and deep hole was suddenly opened. Rorschach, who remained silent, was somewhat unforgiving. He started running and rushed in front of Night Demon in an instant. Rorschach leaned over and pulled up the Night Demon, who started to bleed between his mouth and nose. The back of the sword was raised high and it was about to fall like raindrops. Then his whole body suddenly stopped moving. He froze in place. At this time, Rorschach looked straight at the dark and deep breach in the wall, through the light of flashlights scattered around the store and a burning fire that has not yet been extinguished. The depth of the wall that was accidentally knocked open by the Night Demon. It was as if something was floating around, it swaying in the wind. The confused Rorschach casually dropped the unable to move Night Demon. He raised the Catachan saber in his palm. Turning the blade over, he chopped wildly at the wall in front of him, trying to enlarge the hole. Cough! At this time, Night Demon, who had just recovered from dizziness, struggled to get up. He clenched his fists at Rorschach's back. Just as he was about to speak, the sound waves that kept echoing in his ears quickly outlined the scene inside the wall. Night Demon also froze on the spot. His whole body was stiff to an unimaginable degree. It seemed that he no longer had the energy to compete with Rorschach. Kakaka! The sound of Rorschach hacking at the wall was like invisible nails hammering into the Night Demon's heart. Then Night Demon, who wiped away the blood from the corner of his mouth, bent down to pick up the short stick, walked forward without saying a word, and helped Rorschach destroy the wall. 5 minutes later, the entire wall was completely peeled off by two people, and the scene inside the wall is completely revealed in front of you. In a hidden warehouse of only 20 square meters, densely hanging objects were put into transparent bags. A corpse that has been vacuumed out, even though it seems to be filled with a lot of anti-corrosion materials. But the smell of corruption still keeps escaping. Even Rorschach's gas mask couldn't resist it. What's even more shocking is that none of the corpses in the vacuum bags were adults. All children. They were disemboweled one by one, their internal organs were removed without sutures, and even their eyeballs were taken out, leaving only horrifying hollow holes. Rorschach and Night Demon stood still, motionless. At this moment, the one on the outside of the warehouse was obviously a vacuum bag that had just been hung up. It still caught Rorschach's attention. It seems to contain a little black boy who was born with a mutilated palm. In an instant, Rorschach's fingertips trembled slightly. He raised his arm silently and hesitated for a moment. In the end, Rorschach flipped the saber. The hanging body was moved with the handle of the knife, revealing the profile of the little black boy. At first glance, the corpse's ears seemed to be born defective. There was only a small hole. The expressionless Rorschach could not help but look away, as if he could not bear to look directly. Jerry, the brother that Big Mouth Mike had been looking for. Now he has become a cold, a rotting and smelly corpse heretic. In an instant, Rorschach's chest was filled with burning anger. The miserable experience of a human child. It gradually resonated with the ideas of the Empire in Warhammer. Heretics and chaos must die. People go to prison and dogs die. Chaos. Rorschach's suppressed angry voice echoed in the empty hall. At the same time, It also made the dazed night demon completely sober. He took a deep breath. He stepped forward and picked up the body of a child, trying to put it down from the hook. The night demon's movements were very gentle, like a loving priest baptizing a newborn child, full of holiness and mercy. But Rorschach tightened his saber again. He walked to the center of the bloody battlefield without saying a word. Rorschach looked down, looking for any corpse with a head. Then, he chopped off the opponent's head with his knife. "What are you doing?" The hoarse and low voice of the night demon came from behind, full of doubts and confusion. Rorschach, who had just chopped off a head, did not turn his head back. A cold voice slowly burst out from the mask, "Sacrifice for the children." Before the voice fell, the night demon knelt down slowly with a vacuum bag containing a child's body in his hand. After he gently put down the body, a prayer from the Bible also sounded low. Rorschach carried a few heads, walked to the nearby place and put them down, then turned around to continue. The night demon, who had never killed anyone, did not stop Rorschach's brutal methods. The silent Rorschach did not interrupt the night demon's useless prayer. At least at this moment, two men with different life experiences, but the paths they chose seemed to lead to the same destination. They are all using their own methods, comforting the souls of the children who have not yet left chapter 24-24024. The Age of Heroes? The Age of Chaos. Half an hour later, the two men raced ahead of the police's arrival. Part ways, Rorschach was no longer in the mood to tangle with the night demon. The night devil whose identity is exposed has no energy and motivation. Stop Rorschach from taking away the stolen money. And since those remains were discovered, Rorschach's chest seemed to be burning with a swelling anger. It made him want to kill all the gangs in New York. However, on the way home, after Rorschach had disposed of most of the disposable equipment along the way, the gradual return of reason stopped his impulse. The sportswear mafia has been destroyed. The crisis involving him and his aunt disappeared. The rest is no longer his task. No matter how incompetent the federal government is, it will face such a sensational thing. It is also time to mobilize forces among various departments. NYPD, FBI. Maybe SHIELD will be involved in the investigation. If the media learns more inside information. Massive reporting. I'm afraid Stark, who is far away in Los Angeles, will also get involved. In the age of science and technology, we face the all-pervasive artificial intelligence Jarvis. Even the cautious Rorschach. There is no confidence that can be hidden. He will face authorities one day, but not yet. Keep a low profile and keep a low profile. Until Rorschach mastered more powerful power. Be able to face everything more calmly is his primary goal. He was never a hero. Just an ordinary person fighting for his family. 4 o'clock in the morning. Rorschach, returning from Hell's Kitchen, enters the apartment. Instead of going straight home, he headed to the basement. Reinforcement work is now completed on the basement. It can be temporarily used as a secret base. Rorschach, who was not sleepy, counted the stolen funds. 1.98 million in cash. If you add the remaining 680,000 under the bed in Rorschach's bedroom, a total of 2.66 million. Rorschach became a millionaire overnight. Unfortunately, large amounts of black money cannot be deposited into the card at once, unless Rorschach is willing to spend time ants moving. Save it little by little. Collected all the cash and hid the Katachan saber. Rorschach, who carried a plasma pistol with him, locked the iron door of the basement. Go upstairs and go home. When Rorschach stepped into his home, he seemed to have left everything behind. He took a shower carefully. Then I found some food from the refrigerator for a snack. As the cold food slowly enters the stomach, Rorschach, who was somewhat disturbed, gradually found the feeling of the past. That is the security of home. Didn't wake up my aunt who was still sleeping. After finishing the food, Rorschach returned to the bedroom. He placed the plasma pistol next to the pillow and fell asleep slowly. The bodies of 23 children were lined up, placed neatly on the ground. 13 mutilated and bloody heads, piling up into a terrifying hill, standing in front of the child's body. It seemed as if they were paying homage, but also seemed to be simply venting their anger. This is a large number of New York police officers who are belatedly arriving, after stepping into a messy baby shopping mall. The terrifying scene I saw at first sight. For a time, both experienced police officers. The faces of all the new police officers who had just joined the job suddenly changed. They cannot bear the rising desire to vomit. They all ran to the parking lot outside the baby mall and sprayed as hard as they could. Even if it is repeated orders from superiors. No one wanted to enter the scene a second time. Being punished at work is still a secondary issue. Psychological shadow is something that will follow you for a lifetime. Hence, this embarrassing situation. This continued until the FBI intervened early. Only then did we reluctantly start the basic investigation process for Baby Mall. but even well-informed federal agents. Faced with a large number of crime scenes where the identity of the deceased is complex and the nature of the case is ambiguous, it was also at a loss. In particular, the remains of children may be implicated in previous news reports of child abductions. The FBI began to hope that this was a hot potato. As the reports are leveled up, other departments will take over the investigation. Rorschach. The sleeping Rorschach was woken up from his sleep by his aunt. He opened his eyes and saw his aunt standing in front of the bedroom door in her nightgown. His aunt never entered his bedroom without permission, unless something happens. Rorschach took a deep breath, stood up and asked, "Aunt? What's wrong?" "Big news. Stark." The aunt danced happily and described to Rorschach. "That billionaire Tony Stark admits his hero status." Rorschach frowned slightly and blinked. "No way, so fast?" He got up and followed his aunt into the living room. The image of Stark admitting his identity as Iron Man is being played over and over again on TV. Even if Rorschach keeps jumping channels, every TV station was reporting the same story. Billionaire Stark returns from his disappearance. The prodigal son turned around and became a superhero. This is absolutely breaking news right now. Even the previous child kidnapping incident was completely suppressed and became yesterday's news. After all, even after Rorschach's deception, the aunt who knew about the existence of the hero in advance also fell into a strong desire to eat melons. Not to mention those people who need entertainment every day. However, Rorschach was not very excited. Stark's hero identity was made public. It also made the whole world enter a chaotic era with monsters crawling everywhere, especially heroes like Night Devil. In the past, they were just frequent visitors in the police files, urban legends circulating in the Steel City. But from now on, while superheroes continue to appear, those supervillains who are more harmful will continue to appear. Seeing that my aunt began to pick up her mobile phone and share various gossips with her friends, Rorschach, who was gradually enveloped by a sense of crisis, decided to conduct the next simulation as soon as possible. The consumption of cooling time requires him to buy a large number of guns to replenish. Anyway, so much black money must find a way to be converted into Rorschach's power. Rorschach said to his aunt and returned to the bedroom. He did not start the simulation immediately, but sat cross-legged on the ground. Rorschach, calm and composed, prayed briefly and powerfully to the Emperor. "Emperor bless you." Rorschach, with a solemn expression, opened the simulator. Because he encountered the evil god Tzinch when he chose the identity of a Krieg Grenadier last time, Rorschach hesitated for a moment and chose to descend randomly. Simulation starting. Current identity: Kadachan Recruit, Krieg Grenadier. Please choose your descending identity first. If you refuse, you will descend randomly. Identity selection has been refused. Simulation starting. You descended into the Warhammer universe. Time: unknown location, Milky Way, unknown star region, Pelia. You descended to the surface of the planet. You found yourself inside an escape pod. You didn't have time to observe the surrounding environment. You were attacked by a suffocating stench so strong that it made you sick. You fell into an unstoppable coma. Political Commissar 1 more. You seemed to hear some noise and then completely lost consciousness. Chapter 25 #25025, Kane, Jurgen, and you Part 1. You woke up from coma and opened your eyes. Your sense of smell smelled the disgusting, horrible stench again. You suddenly felt dizzy and tried to adapt for a long time before you could barely get better. There was something wrong with your sense of smell and taste. They failed. Your unexpected behavior seemed to attract the attention of others. A middle-aged officer wearing the uniform of an Imperial commissar and with outstanding appearance walked out of the shadows and came to you. Why do I remember that there were only Jurgen and I in the escape pod? The middle-aged officer stared at you intently and said slowly. The middle-aged officer's wide-brimmed hat on his head was slightly tilted, apparently because the temperature in the escape pod was too high. He also casually tore open the collar of his clothes, revealing a clump of dense and vigorous chest hair. You regained your spirit after your sense of smell failed. You told the other party that everything was arranged by the Emperor. You are loyal to the Empire and are willing to offer your loyalty to the Emperor. The middle-aged officer looked at you repeatedly and put away the laser pistol in his palm. He showed you a brilliant smile and chose to believe your words. Strange young man, there is a good news and a bad news. Which one do you want to hear first? The middle-aged officer's smile did not diminish. You hesitated for a moment and decided to listen to the bad news first. The bad news is that we are surrounded by endless greenskins, because Comrade Jurgen's old fear of flying has relapsed, and the escape pod he personally drove sent us directly to the rear of the Orc defense line. More importantly, we don't have many weapons and ammunition, and even food supplies are running out. The middle-aged officer introduced the current situation to you without hiding anything. You agreed with this. This is indeed very bad news. Because the middle-aged officer had an expression of indifference on his face even when he told the bad news, you couldn't help but gradually raise hope, and you couldn't wait to ask about the good news. Huh, good news? In such a bad situation, we now have at least 3 people to face it all. The middle-aged officer's outstanding face finally revealed a long-hidden smirk. You suddenly realized, and at the same time couldn't help shaking your head and sighing. Having one more hand to face the greenskins is probably the real reason why the other party is willing to believe you. Even the Chaos Forces are unwilling to face a large group of greenskin orcs who are crying for a fight alone. You gradually understand the current situation. You showed some combat capabilities to the other party and you won the recognition of the middle-aged officer. You tried to ask the middle-aged officer's name. K-Face Kane, the political commissar of the 597th Regiment of Valhalla. Young man, no matter where you came from in the past, now, welcome to join the 597th Regiment, soldier for the Emperor. The political commissar named Kane said to you sincerely. You chose to join the 597th Regiment and became a soldier under political commissar Kane. After Kane's introduction, you got to know the real owner of the terrible stench again. He is Kane's adjutant. Comrade Jurgen, the first-class gunner, is a rude man who has been troubled by the stench and severe skin disease for many years. You tried to communicate with Jurgen, but the other party was very resistant to you, who had a mysterious origin. Political Commissar Kane assured him that you were a trustworthy Imperial warrior. Comrade Jurgen seemed to listen to Kane's explanation and reluctantly accepted your existence. On the first day, you followed Comrade Jurgen, who looked unfriendly, to plunder all the supplies in the escape pod. After careful sorting, you and Jurgen found that the supplies that were originally enough for 2 people to sustain for about half a month could only last for a week because of your unexpected joining. Comrade Jurgen expressed dissatisfaction with this, and you said that you could appropriately reduce your food portion. Commissar Kane immediately rejected the proposal. He believed that the 3 of them could not sit and wait for death, and waiting for the Empire's rescue was unrealistic. The only way for the 3 of you to survive now is to cross the green-skinned orcs' defense line and enter the control area of the Empire. The next day, before departure, Comrade Jurgen carried all the food supplies and his heavy melt-a-gun. Even though it was overweight and difficult to move, Comrade Jurgen was unwilling to share the extra weapons with you. After Commissar Kane persuaded him, Comrade Jurgen was willing to give you a laser gun, but he only gave you an energy battery. You had no grudges about this. The laser gun was much better than facing the screaming greenskins with bare hands. On the 3rd day, you entered a forest for a short rest and unexpectedly encountered a small group of wandering greenskins. You made Commissar Kane look at you with admiration through your accurate shooting skills and the ruthlessness when executing the greenskins. Even the stubborn Jurgen had to admit your excellence, and he, who was always stingy, actually gave you 2 more energy batteries. On the 4th day, because of Jurgen's poor sense of direction, you entered a plain area, and you were once again chased by a large number of greenskins. Kane recognized that these were greenskins from the evil Sun Clan through the clan logo of the orcs and the red vehicles they drove. They were obsessed with the speed of the gallop and the roar of the engine, and believed that painting the vehicle red would increase the speed by 3 times. You, Commissar Kane, and Comrade Jurgen fled in a hurry, running until you were exhausted and barely got rid of the greenskins behind you. After a short rest, you found that, because you were only concerned with escaping, the few energy batteries on you were completely lost, and even Jurgen's food rations on his back had lost a day's worth. On the 5th day, your stomach was extremely hungry, and you could only use precious fresh water to quench your appetite. Kane gave you half of the food Jurgen gave him again. You wanted to refuse, but Commissar Kane said that he didn't have the habit of letting his soldiers fight on an empty stomach, and you also needed to maintain your combat ability. At night, Comrade Jurgen came to you shyly and stuffed you with a few precious candies. At the same time, he also expressed regret for the lost supplies. You laughed it off and tried to comfort the stubborn Jurgen. The Emperor would bless the 3 of you. On the 6th day, under Kane's leadership, you didn't encounter any harassment from greenskins along the way. Perhaps it was the Emperor's mercy that you even found a place where you could replenish a lot of fresh water, and there was no trace of a greenskin around. In the first week, you lost a lot of weight. Because of the large amount of fresh water, you were still in high spirits. Kane and Jurgen were obviously much more haggard. Your food supply has been completely exhausted. You accidentally raised a bold question, that is, whether the meat of greenskin orcs can be eaten. Kane and Jurgen looked at each other, but they did not object to your question, but were eager to try. In the 2nd week, the 3 of you finally failed to eat the local specialty, greenskin barbecue. On the verge of collapse, you accidentally encountered a small group of defeated local defense forces. Kane, who was tortured by hunger, immediately revealed his identity as an officer of the Imperial Political Commissar and temporarily took over the command of the entire team. You found piles of ant bull cans and combat rations in a Chimera infantry fighting vehicle. You couldn't suppress your excitement and shared a lot of joy with Kane and Jurgen. However, just as you were about to fall asleep after a full meal, Kane with a serious expression found you. Be careful, they may be rebels. Commissar Kane lowered his voice. You sighed and picked up the laser gun again. Chapter 26 Cephas Kane and Jurgen and you Part 2 have finished warming up. After a brief conflict, all the rebels surrendered. You think this small group of defense forces in front of you are not rebels, they are just a group of mortal troops who were frightened by the billowing greenskins. Because even their battle cry is that they don't want to be sent to the front line to die by the Imperial Political Commissar. You once again killed several rebels who tried to incite the soldiers. Comrade Jurgen also took up the heavy melta gun that he never gave up, and a brutal massacre was about to begin. Political Commissar Kane stopped you and Jurgen's barbaric behavior in time. Kane stood on the top of a Chimera infantry fighting vehicle. He gave an emotional speech to the frustrated defense forces who had abandoned their armor about retreat being an attack. His words were full of impassioned words. You are non-committal about this, but before the speech is over, Political Commissar Kane is surrounded by warm support from all the defense forces. All the soldiers are high-spirited and morale-boosting, as if they want to fight the green-skinned orcs for another 300 battles. Political Commissar Kane miraculously obtained the command authority of this small defense force. You were puzzled and found Kane to ask. Political Commissar Kane replied with a smile. He just gave them a hope of living. In the third week, you who entered motorization with both feet met more local refugees on their escape journey, as well as more defense forces defeated by the greenskins. After careful consideration, Political Commissar Kane relied on his extremely excellent eloquence to win over. They defeated the defeated army, calmed the frightened local refugees, and formed a huge fleeing team. You and Jurgen secretly dealt with some unconvinced thorns, and at the same time took on the arduous responsibility of protecting local refugees. However, with the increase in numbers and equipment, your huge and bloated escape team seems to have attracted more attention from the greenskins. They ride on tattered junk motorcycles, brandishing machetes and oversized firearms, and begin to chase and intercept your fleeing team. In the fourth week, the situation of the fleeing team is not good. Although there is no shortage of food supplies, weapons and ammunition, more and more greenskins have become a more deadly problem. Political Commissar Kane believes that the orc warlord must have discovered your fleeing team and issued an order to stop the pursuit. You and Comrade Jurgen are gradually tired of dealing with the frequent greenskins. At the suggestion of Political Commissar Kane, you temporarily put down your laser gun and began to clumsily try to command the defense forces that were completely integrated by you. You reluctantly became an officer, and your perspective also increased from the battle to the entire battlefield. You led the defense forces to attack everywhere, struggling to resist the incoming greenskins. The escape team briefly repaired, and Political Commissar Kane found you who was resting. Kane thinks with a solemn expression that if you cannot get rid of the large number of greenskins behind the team, it may be difficult to successfully reach the Empire's sphere of influence. You cheer up and express your willingness to lead a death squad composed of defense forces to try to guide the greenskins' attack direction. Commissar Kane smiled slightly and declined politely, saying that the Valhalla 597th Regiment did not have the battlefield custom of abandoning its comrades. In the fifth week, you, Political Commissar Kane, and Comrade Jurgen, plus a group of defense forces who volunteered to join the death squads, chose a Chimera infantry fighting vehicle with a stable machine sold to start a fight with the greenskins behind the fleeing team. Engaged in a fierce blocking battle. Your mission is very simple: attract the attention of a large number of greenskins and buy time for the escape team, which is mainly local refugees. The brutality of this battle was beyond imagination. More than half of the 10 kamikaze defense forces were killed or injured. You barely completed the mission and attracted a large number of greenskins. In the speeding Chimera infantry tank, you lowered your head to deal with the injuries on your body. You looked at Political Commissar Kane only to find that the other party was unscathed. It was incredible. In the sixth week, under the leadership of Political Commissar Kane, the remaining 8 of your death squad started a guerrilla war with the greenskins. The greenskins stopped pursuing and took a rest. You stepped forward to harass and throw grenades. The angry greenskins got up to pursue. You relied on the mobility advantage of the Chimera infantry fighting vehicle and fire interception to get rid of the greenskins. Due to the increase in the number of battles, the combat quality of the 5 defense troops in the death squads has improved a lot. None of them are afraid of the greenskins. Instead, they see the greenskins with their eyes shining, waiting for a beating. Fortunately, you were gradually approaching the Empire's sphere of influence. Comrade Jurgen believes that victory is just around the corner, and even you have to agree with this idea. Unfortunately, the orc warlord who has been waiting for a long time is blocking your way. The sudden encounter caught you off guard. The death squad instantly lost 3 members. You were surrounded by countless greenskins. The mobility advantage of the Chimera infantry fighting vehicle was completely lost. Facing the disaster of annihilation, Political Commissar Kane put forward a plan to capture the thief first and capture the king without changing his expression. You didn't hesitate at all, you just silently carried a few terrifyingly powerful melt bombs. The Suicide Squad members rely on the firepower of the Chimera infantry fighting vehicle to attract other greenskins. You, Commissar Kane and Jurgen attack in the direction of the orc warlord. Comrade Jurgen's heavy melta gun once again played its role, and the powerful firepower briefly cleared a passage to face the orc warlord. You charge ahead of Commissar Kane, firing the laser gun at will. Almost every shot will knock down a greenskin. However, the number of greenskins never decreases, and they surge towards you too like a tide. You and Commissar Kane are trapped by the greenskins, and the heavy melta gun operated by Comrade Jurgen beside you is about to go out of service. At the critical moment, you show Commissar Kane the melta bomb you carry. Commissar Kane hesitates, but then nods heavily. You take advantage of the passage that Jurgen's heavy melta gun has cleared again and launch a final death charge towards the orc warlord. You are seriously injured when you are 5 meters away from the orc warlord. You have to detonate the melta bomb in advance to try to cause damage to the orc warlord. You are instantly melted into ashes by the extreme high temperature. You are dead. This simulation ends, which takes 42 days. This simulation obtains the option to keep 1. Imperial Infantryman's Introductory Manual Full Set 2. Meltabomb 1-3. KFS Kane's chainsword finally crafted. This simulation has exceeded 24 hours, and simulator wear and tear has not been exempted. Cooling time 42 hours. Current available cooling time 160 hours. Do you want to consume cooling time? Chapter 27-27027. With this chainsaw sword, chaos is shit. Selected consumption cooling time 42 hours. Current remaining cooling time 118 hours. Rorschach blinked a few times. Direct consumption of resource time offsets the simulated cooldown. Then he laughed with surprise. In this simulation, he actually lived for 1.5 months. This is the highest record since Rorschach obtained the simulator and simulated it several times. Could it be that the Emperor's Blessing and Commissar Kane, nicknamed Warhammer Y Xiaobao, played an important role together? Rorschach laughed it off. His eyes fell back on the reward options provided by the simulator for the first 2 items. Rorschach almost glanced at it without even looking at it. He chose the third option without hesitation. Kefas Kane's masterfully crafted chainsword. This is one of the symbolic weapons of the Warhammer universe. A bolter in one hand and a chainsword in the other. Such a free and easy fighting image is not far away from Rorschach. He's at least half done. Moreover, after so long of simulation, Rorschach also understood. No matter how many weapons and equipment he obtained in the simulation, when selecting rewards, they can only be obtained randomly. And you can only choose one of them, unless it's a gift from the Emperor. Like a plasma pistol that never overheats. However, Rorschach also doesn't want to receive blessings every day. Once the Emperor laid eyes on him again, then he was not facing the Chaos Demon. There was just another little entanglement and collision with the 4 gods just when Rorschach's thoughts were drifting away. One handle is 1 meter and 3 meters long and half a foot wide. A chain sword weighing 5 kilograms appeared out of thin air in his palm. Rorschach jumped up from the ground. He exerted a little force on his arm and waved the chain sword in his hand a few times. On the single-edged chain sword, countless sharp saw teeth have not yet begun to rotate. It also split the air in an instant, emitting waves of low buzzing. For today's Rorschach, 5 kilograms is just the right weight. It's full of weight when danced. Just by virtue of the weight of the chainsword itself, it's enough to crack open a human skull in one stroke. Grinning, Rorschach successfully found the motor switch located on the hilt of the sword. He flipped the switch. The built-in motor in the chainsword started instantly. The deafening roar resounded throughout the room. Boom, boom, boom. Countless sharp sawtooths rotated rapidly, pulling out a terrifying afterimage that was breathtaking. The excited Rorschach felt the strong vibrations transmitted from his palms, as well as the huge roar in his ears. He couldn't help but have a bright smile on his face. Bam! However, Rorschach, who was caught up in excitement, did not remain complacent for long. I saw that the bedroom door was suddenly opened. The aunt looked at Rorschach with a shocked face, who was holding a chainsword and smiling stupidly. Rorschach, before her eyes widened, her aunt could speak. Rorschach quickly pressed the switch and turned off the chainsword's motor. He smiled awkwardly and said, "Haha, they are all issued uniformly. I just took them out individually to play with. Oh, why do you boys like to dance with knives and guns?" The shock on the aunt's face quickly faded, as if her emotions had calmed down quickly. She couldn't help rolling her eyes and said in a complaining tone, "Be careful, don't hurt yourself if you have time. Go find a place where no one is around to play. The neighbor next door has to work night shift." Before he finished speaking, the door was closed again. Rorschach was left alone in the bedroom in a daze. For a moment, the expression on Luozia's face was one of surprise and uncertainty. "And did you take the wrong medicine? Or did the vaccination given to my aunt take effect?" Rorschach couldn't help blinking his eyes several times, indicating that he had no clue. However, he did not continue to waste brain cells. After all, aunt support is a good thing, right? Rorschach reluctantly put the chainsword on the bed. He pulled out a laptop from his desk that he hadn't touched in a long time. Opened Google Chrome to query. Rorschach vaguely remembered that the chainsword in the Warhammer universe requires a metal element called promethium as driving fuel. Unlike the plasma pistol, even if the battery power is low, it can be heated by fire for a period of time. Frowning, Rorschach searched repeatedly for a long time. "I just found the market price of promethium from a professional forum. It's about 60,000 yuan per ton." Rorschach couldn't help laughing. Even if he chopped the chain sword to pieces, he probably wouldn't have used a ton of fuel, right? Luozia's brows widened, and then he seemed to remember something again. Opened Google Chrome again. He went directly to Amazon's shopping site and ordered a cheap, sturdy musical instrument case. After all, the 1 3 meter chain sword is too eye-catching. If you take it out, you need to carry out basic camouflage. After everything is done, Rorschach lay on the bed, raised the chain sword with one hand and admired it repeatedly. Then, he subconsciously opened the simulator. Check the cooldown time above. 118 hours remaining. At first glance it looks quite abundant. But as the simulation time becomes longer and longer in the future, I'm afraid it's not enough. Rorschach needs to replenish gun resources as soon as possible, and has a stable supply channel. The evil star of the underworld has no way to go, so Rorschach plans to abide by the law. Rorschach squinted and picked up the phone. "We inquired about the selling price of the guns and the conditions for purchasing them in large quantities." However, he frowned again while browsing the information on the internet. New York City is a city where guns are prohibited by law. It has very strict gun control laws. Even adults with legal gun licenses purchase guns. He can only hold a weak pistol. Moreover, even if Rorschach has a gun license, he is very willing to go to other states that support gun ownership. Only one gun can be purchased from legal sources every 15 days. For Rorschach, consuming a gun is as simple as drinking water and eating. It is undoubtedly a drop in the bucket. Rorschach smacked his lips and jumped up from the bed. He casually put down the chainsword he was playing with. Then he took out a few wads of cash from under the bed and walked out of the bedroom. The situation online may not be true. He needs to go find a gun shop in New York and ask about it. Rorschach spoke to his aunt, then went out and left the apartment. It has to be said, even if guns are prohibited by law, there are gun shops almost everywhere in New York. Even some grocery stores are licensed to sell guns. Rorschach briefly asked several gun shop owners, but I found that the information on the internet was indeed not nonsense. During this period, only one shop owner told Rorschach. If Rorschach would pay more, he would sell 10 pistols. Rorschach tentatively asked about the price. He instantly understood the gun shop owner in front of him. Think of him as a young scapegoat who doesn't understand the market. Rorschach smiled and refused. Back to the streets again. He disappeared into the crowd. Chapter 28-28028, New Mount and Scapegoat. Half a day later, after visiting most of the gun stores in Chinatown, Rorschach chose to give up temporarily. According to what Rorschach knew, he followed the law-abiding route, unless he went abroad to Mexico or the Middle East. Or he set up a company and won the favor of arms dealers through high-value business contracts. Otherwise, it would be impossible to open up a channel, quickly obtain a large number of firearms. In other words, except for robbing the warehouse of arms dealers, the only way for Rorschach to obtain a large number of firearms from the local area is through gangs. After all, snakes have their own ways and rats have their own ways. Each gang controls one or several gun smuggling routes. So, the whole thing returned to the starting point again. However, it cannot be said that there was no progress. Rorschach's journey was not without gain. After spending $500 to equip the plasma pistol with a suitable sling holster, Rorschach successfully obtained a phone number related to a private gun dealer from a gun store owner. And according to the gossip of the gun store owner, the other party has no gang background. However, small businesses with less than 100 guns should not be disturbed to avoid unnecessary misunderstandings by gun dealers. Being treated as a police officer fishing, Rorschach was half believing and half doubting. However, he did not refuse the kindness of the gun store owner. He chose to write down the phone number. This can be regarded as finding a non-gang smuggling channel. As for the truth, Rorschach needs to judge it himself. At this time, Rorschach, who was strolling on the street, planned to go home first. A lot of things were still waiting for him to deal with. He needed to take a look at the decoration work of the restaurant and give his aunt suggestions for rectification. The makeup exam from Midtown High School also awaited his visita. My bicycle. Rorschach, who was thinking about it, suddenly stopped. He slapped his forehead with annoyance. Perhaps it was his strong physique and reckless behavior. In an instant, passers-by around him hid a few meters away. They avoided the startled Rorschach. Rorschach, standing in place, took a deep breath. He walked forward without looking around. As long as he was not embarrassed, then others would be embarrassed. As for the bicycle, according to the current security situation in New York, if it is parked outside the school for more than a day, it must be lost. Rorschach had no choice but to accept the reality. After walking through a block, Rorschach's eyes accidentally fell on the motorcycle shop next to the street. After hesitating for a moment, Rorschach instantly decided to upgrade his weapon. He stepped into the car shop, and before he had time to check the goods, a black-haired white man in a suit hurriedly came up. "Hello, sir, what kind of vehicle do you need to buy? Do you have a favorite model?" The white salesperson asked enthusiastically with a bright smile on his face. Faced with the inquiry, Rorschach shook his head and said politely, "I don't know much about motorcycles. The only requirement is the range." After listening to Rorschach's words, the white salesperson immediately became more enthusiastic. He raised his hand to signal and took Rorschach to a booth, pointing to a luxury motorcycle that was slowly rotating on it. The luxury brand's senior master crafted it by hand, and every piece of metal part on the tough guy style body is hand-assembled. The basic model is only $500,000. The second requirement is that the price should be cheaper. As a pragmatist, Rorschach couldn't help but twitch his mouth. He is not an avid motorcycle enthusiast. Any motorcycle is just a means of transportation for him. Besides, the world of the rich is still too far away from the millionaire, Mr. Rorschach. I'll have a chance to get some money from Stark in the future. It doesn't matter. Let's take a look at this one, which is the latest product in spring. The same color scheme as Iron Man is a trend that young people are chasing. The price is $100,000, and credit card installment payments are welcome, with a maximum discount of 10%. Unfortunately, facing the rhetoric that the white salesperson desperately promoted, Rorschach couldn't help but take a deep breath. He now regrets entering this store very much. It seems to be to end this torture as soon as possible. Rorschach squinted his eyes and quickly glanced at the various motorcycles placed around. Then he resolutely pointed to a vehicle that matched the tough guy temperament. "That's it. How much is it?" That for a moment, the smile on the white salesman's face seemed to freeze. However, he still showed absolute professionalism. "This is a scooter that is loved by ladies and men of your physique. It is commonly known as a lamb. The price is only $5,000. But it doesn't meet your first requirement anyway." The white salesman's eyes revealed a trace of helplessness, and he smiled reluctantly. However, Rorschach smiled slightly. "It doesn't matter, it's cheap. Let's get two first and use them up." Use them up? The white salesman seemed unable to understand the nonsense in Rorschach's mouth. However, it is a good thing that the salesman can successfully sell the goods. After Rorschach took out a stack of bills from his pocket, the white salesman had no complaints. After all, the customer is God. Hell's Kitchen Baby Mall. A large number of forensic personnel affiliated with the FBI, wearing white protective suits, they went in and out of the mall hall. They tried to continue to extract extra evidence from the ruins on the ground. In the weed-covered parking lot, a white police car parked among many black vehicles was particularly eye-catching. Police Captain George Stacy was sitting in the driver's seat. He held a cup of coffee in his hand and looked through the information spread out on the steering wheel. As a communication assistant between the police and the FBI, George obtained the basic authority to know the case. 20 hours after the incident, even though the genetic test has not been completed, through the dental records, the FBI also found out the true identities of all the dead. The Slavic sportswear gang. Except for the leader Fatty Bobby who disappeared, the rest of the dead were basically gang backbones. If nothing unexpected happened, the sportswear gang has become the history of the New York Police Department. George took a sip of coffee and subconsciously flipped through the information. Then he frowned instantly. His palm trembled, and even the coffee in the cup almost spilled on him. Even though George had seen the bodies of those children with his own eyes, but seeing it again from the photo file, George still couldn't stand it. As a father, he couldn't imagine it. If his baby daughter encountered the same thing, would he still be able to uphold the justice brought by the law? Perhaps it was difficult to collect evidence at the crime scene. However, the case was actually simple and easy to understand. Even a newcomer. It was easy to find the hidden truth. Revenge. Bloody revenge. Bloody revenge for the dead children. A vigilante who has been fighting crime for many years finally crossed the vague line because of the unbearable pain and anger? George frowned. Staring at a photo of the remains of a stick-like weapon in the file, he was stunned. Chapter 29-29029. It's decided to be you, Eugene. The next morning, 8 o'clock. Google search reading. My aunt was just about to walk out of the apartment door. The road was blocked by two brightly colored little sheep motorcycles. Rorschach, who was standing aside, pointed at two motorcycles, one red and one yellow, and said with a smile, "Aunt, although your birthday is still more than half a year away, this can be considered an early gift. Anyway, be happy with everything. You brat." Spending money randomly again. Although the aunt couldn't help but roll her eyes at Rorschach, but the grinning corners of his mouth could not hide the smile on his face. "Aunt, let me teach you." The smiling Rorschach wanted to teach her aunt how to operate a motorcycle. Unexpectedly, her aunt pushed Luozi away. The slightly round chin was raised high. "Your aunt used to be an experienced motorcycle gunner. Well, oh, these are all stories from her youth, so don't tell them." The words were not spoken yet. I don't know whether it was the excitement or the blushing aunt. He actually hurriedly snatched the key that Luozi was carrying. She chose the little yellow sheep. "Start the ignition skillfully." Then, my aunt waved her hand and walked away without looking back. "Tisk, I'm looking down on you." Rorschach's eyes widened and he couldn't help but marvel. At the same time, Rorschach also wished her aunt who had received the gift. "I think we can have enough understanding for him obtaining the privilege of making up the exam without authorization." Rorschach subconsciously put his hands behind his back. With a smile on his face, he went upstairs and went home. However, after studying hard for an hour, furious, Rorschach raised his chainsword. He was dancing crazily in the living room, as if he was crazy. Why do students need to learn algebraic geometry and mathematics? Aren't the various angles and methods of arranging murder traps bad? Why do students need to take performance art electives? Is Katachan fighting skills no longer good? Or is Krieg's combat skills poor? After swinging the chainsword continuously for half an hour, exhausted, Rorschach casually dropped his weapon. He sat on the sofa and kept breathing. Forget it if you can't find gun resources. The simulator can still sustain several simulations. However, his diploma continued to cause obstacles in his life. This is even more troublesome as the time goes. Rorschach's eyelids slowly closed and he snored. After Rorschach was awakened by the sound of the door opening, he suddenly realized that the sky outside had darkened. He actually slept all day. Rorschach just wanted to get up and go to the kitchen to make dinner for her aunt. Turning around, I saw my aunt sitting on the sofa in silence with an ugly face. Luozi frowned slightly and asked in confusion, "Aunt, what's wrong? Is there something wrong with the restaurant decoration?" "Jerry, Big Mouth Mike's missing brother has been found." Auntie's eyes were slightly red. She choked and said, "Mike called me. He cried and said that his brother was found, but he was no longer human." Mike's mother was completely insane because she couldn't bear the stimulation. Big-mouthed Mike resigned and expressed his apology, so I didn't retain him. Rorschach was silent. There was no expression on his face and he was as calm as a corpse. Rorschach was actually the first person to know. Unfortunately, there were too many changes involved. He couldn't tell Mike the truth himself. Mike said that because the police still needed to preserve evidence, Jerry's funeral was scheduled for half a month later. My aunt wiped her slightly moist eyes with the back of her hand, shook her head and sighed. Mike said he thanked us for taking care of us over the years, and he hoped we could go to the funeral. Then Luozi nodded silently and whispered, "You really should go there. This is also basic etiquette." "Which community is Mike's home in?" The aunt sighed and said, "Harlem is that famous community of color." Luozi frowned slightly, then relaxed. He said to his aunt with a serious expression, "The public security in that community is very poor. Don't go there without my company." Big Mouth Mike is a good person, but that doesn't mean that all black people are like that. The aunt nodded, stared at Rorschach and said, "I understand. By the way, there is one more thing to tell you. Now that Mike has resigned, the restaurant also needs to recruit waiters and chefs again. Rorschach, you have grown up and have your own career. I don't know anything about superheroes or Captain America, but I know you want to work hard to do good things. This is something worthy of recognition, so my aunt won't stop you." "Aunt, actually I hear your aunt's words." Rorschach couldn't help but open his mouth, but the words welling up in his throat could not come out. Auntie waved her hand and continued, I just hope that you won't be injured or your life will be in danger. I won't force anything else." Rorschach immediately nodded heavily. After being silent for a moment, he changed the subject. "And, have you thought about what kind of person you want to recruit? It doesn't matter whether you're male or female, the main thing is to be careful and obedient, and to be nimble with your hands and feet." He frowned slightly, thought for a while and said, "It doesn't matter if you can't cook. It's just cutting vegetables and serving food. It's a simple job anyway. Let's talk about it after the interview, okay?" Rorschach shrugged his shoulders and chatted with his aunt casually. Not long after, he ended the conversation with his aunt. Midnight, Rorschach, expressionless, held the chainsaw sword in one hand. The other hand holding the plasma pistol was placed on his chest. He lay on the bed and stared at the dim ceiling. Rorschach just checked the number of missing children in the country in recent years. The number of people counted by the New York police alone made him feel shocked. If the disabled children were killed for the economic benefits brought by their organs and corneas, then where did the other more healthy children go? Are the sportswear gangs the only ones in New York, and even the whole country, that carry out similar criminal business? Is the so-called underground king the mastermind behind the entire profit chain? Does he need to notify the superheroes? It's not certain whether Iron Man Stark will take care of it, but Captain America will definitely take care of it. But if Rorschach accidentally reveals his identity, then S.H.I.E.L.D., which is full of Hydra, will always be a huge hidden danger. Also, how can the resources and guns of the simulator be obtained stably? Should I just go crazy and rob the warehouse of the arms dealer? Or learn how to make a gun from the internet? If I make a gun, what materials are needed? Rorschach closed his eyes and his mind was full of thoughts. He thought back and forth about many unanswered questions, until he was drowsy and confused. An idea that he had ignored for a long time suddenly burst out of his mind. "I am out of touch with the news, but someone is well informed." Rorschach sat up from the bed in an instant, with a faint smile on his lips. For example, "Dear classmate Eugene, chapter 30-30030, the arrival of the Revenge Seeker." Rorschach, wearing a black peaked cap, appeared in apartment 403. He held a well-packaged box under one arm. Boom, boom, boom. The other hand knocked on the door in front of him. No one answered. The patient Rorschach struck again. Boom, boom, boom. After waiting for a while, a cautious voice sounded from inside the door. "Who?" Luozia narrowed her eyes slightly and said calmly, "Me, Rorschach." The words were not spoken yet. There was a flurry of footsteps retreating back and forth, quickly moving away from the door. Rorschach couldn't help but sigh when he heard the movement. Obviously, Eugene had a lot of psychological shadow about his visit. Tens of seconds later, with the sound of footsteps approaching again, the door opened slightly a crack. From the crack in the door, a pair of alert and slightly frightened eyes were revealed. I really haven't done anything bad recently. I've been staying at home to recuperate." Rorschach blinked and a smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. "Eugene, I'm not here to trouble you. I have business to attend to." However, Eugene's eyes were full of doubt. "Real?" Luozia's face darkened and he scolded, "Open the door." "Okay." Crash in an instant, the chain fell off. Eugene opened the door. It also revealed the color on his neck, as well as his right arm and left foot that were in plaster. Eugene tried his best to nod and bend, forced a forced smile on his face, and motioned for Rorschach to come in. Rorschach nodded and walked into the apartment. Before he could open his mouth to explain his purpose, Eugene, whose forehead was covered with sweat, said first, "Rorschach, I haven't disclosed a word about you to the outside world ever since I found out that those gangs kidnapped children. I won't betray you even if I am beaten to death." "Thank you, but I'm not here for this." Rorschach, who was standing there, took a look at Eugene's injuries and said. Then he pulled out the box held under his arm. It was a mobile phone gift box with the Iron Man logo printed on it. "I came to you just to give you a new mobile phone. Do you believe it?" I don't believe it." Eugene looked at Rorschach in surprise. There was some uneasiness in his expression. Seeing that Rorschach is now tall and strong, the muscles under the clothes are stronger than him. Eugene, who didn't want to be beaten, quickly laughed. "Rorschach, do you want my help with something?" "Don't worry, I know what I was like in the past, and I also know how much I'm worth." However, Rorschach shook his head slightly. He stared at Eugene and said with a sincere expression, "I used to be very angry and used extreme methods to deal with problems. Therefore, I specially bought a new mobile phone co-branded with Iron Man and gave it back to you as an apology." As soon as he finished speaking, the sneer on Eugene's face gradually disappeared. He looked at Rorschach repeatedly. Suddenly he shook his head and said with a smile, "I thought you came here to apologize. However, I am still sure that you really have something to ask me for." After speaking, Eugene moved. He limped to the side of the sofa and sat down slowly. Rorschach raised his eyebrows and walked over, sitting opposite Eugene. As soon as he sat down, he handed the mobile phone case to Eugene. Eugene, who frowned slightly, took it but did not choose to open it. Instead, he placed it gently on his thigh, with the plaster on his right hand pressing down on the box. Eugene hesitated and asked, "Rorschach, if you have anything to ask me, just tell me. I will do my best to help you wherever I can." "Okay, then I won't be polite." Rorschach, who squinted his eyes, nodded. "Do you have a wide enough circle of friends? Do you know some friends in Gray Industries? I need some intelligence information." Eugene, am not bragging. I have friends all over New York. The Gray Industry? Which one are you referring to? Counterfeit money? Forged documents? Or something else?" Eugene blinked a few times and asked very cautiously. Rorschach did not hide anything and said straight to the point. "I need guns, lots of guns. The more, the better. If you can't get too much at one time, the quantity provided per week cannot be less than 100, of course, because it is a long-term purchase. The price must be more favorable. Mr. Police, I'm a good person. I don't join a gang. I don't participate in smuggling either." However, Rorschach's confession caused Eugene to misunderstand. Eugene suddenly raised his voice and shouted loudly. At the same time, he looked towards the door, as if waiting for something to happen. Rorschach was stunned for a moment, and then understood why Eugene reacted like this. He waved his hand, sighed and said, "I don't carry any listening equipment, and I'm not fishing for the police." Rorschach explained it several times. This dispelled Eugene's concerns. Then, Eugene, who frowned, grinned and said, "Rorschach, I remember you hadn't graduated from high school when I was expelled, right? Why did you buy so many guns? That many guns are enough to start a small war. Do you plan to be a second-rate dealer?" Eugene smiled slightly and remained silent. Eugene, with a gloomy face, kept looking at Rorschach. His expression changed back and forth. He hesitated for a long time before he said cautiously, "I can't promise you. I can only do my best after all. I'm just a gangster who hasn't even joined a gang, but I have a wider range of friends." Rorschach nodded to show his understanding. He didn't rely entirely on Eugene. It would be best if it could be done, and if it failed, he would find another way. Rorschach and Eugene continued to discuss for a while. After agreeing on the contact information, Rorschach got up and left. As the door closed, Eugene, limping, slumped back on the sofa. His eyes subconsciously fell on the mobile phone box with the very eye-catching Iron Man logo. The emotions that had been brewing for a long time. Eugene suddenly sighed. "It's been a long time since anyone gave me a gift." Eugene, with a complicated expression, took out an old keypad mobile phone from the plaster of his arm. He planned to contact his friends and ask Rorschach for news. At this moment, the door of the apartment was knocked again. Knock, knock, knock. Eugene was slightly stunned. Rorschach is back again? Regretted giving the phone away and planned to take it back? Eugene, who secretly complained, stood up again with difficulty. Limped to the door. However, after opening the door, what appeared in front of Eugene was a strange tall figure. A height of more than 1.9 meters. A Slavic woman with fair skin, blonde hair and blue eyes. At a glance, her physique was even stronger than that of Eugene, a man, and her whole body exuded a mixed beauty of strength and elegance. Before Eugene, who was puzzled, asked, the delicate Slavic woman suddenly asked in a cold tone, "Are you Eugene?" "I am Sergei's mother. He has been missing for a week. Do you know his whereabouts?" As soon as the voice fell, Eugene's back suddenly felt cold and cold sweat oozed out of his back. Chapter 31-31031. Hey, eat my chainsaw sword. 2 days passed. Google search reading Rorschach still hasn't received a call from Eugene. He was not in a hurry because there was no point in being anxious. Eugenia, who lives a leisurely life, took the time to post a few recruitment posters for her aunt. The rest of the time was almost spent studying. During this period of time, he had been studying hard and didn't even open the simulator interface. 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Rorschach was sitting at his desk, concentrating on emotions. I plan to compete with high school knowledge. Ding. Right now. Rorschach's cell phone screen flickered and received a new message. He picked it up casually. After seeing the message from Eugene, I subconsciously clicked on it. However, Rorschach only gave it a cursory glance. His whole face became serious, and his eyes even opened a lot. Eugene, something might have happened. Otherwise, he wouldn't have sent a message with weird content. Sender, Eugene. Haha, long time no see. Brother, I found what you were looking for. I'm in the Battery Park Tunnel in Brooklyn. There's a maintenance passage in the middle. I'll be waiting for you inside. See you there. Not only is the title at the beginning of the message wrong, and Eugene wouldn't say see you there or not at the end of the message. This doesn't fit Eugene's character at all. especially when facing Rorschach. Also, the address so detailed. He also revealed the other party's fear that Rorschach would not be found. Thinking of this, Uozia stood up slowly with a stern expression. This is a phishing message. However, since someone wants to fish through Eugene, then the target must not be Eugene, but him. Since the other party likes fishing so much, then be careful, what you catch is a great white shark. Uozia's eyes flashed coldly. He quickly put on the holster of the plasma pistol on his back. Another loose coat was put on to block the terrifyingly powerful murder weapon. He was about to turn around and leave, but his eyes accidentally fell on the chain sword beside him. At this moment, the cold saw teeth shone slightly, as if eager for the infiltration of hot blood, because the box I ordered hasn't arrived yet. Without any hesitation, Rorschach turned around and pulled out a gray sheet. The whole package covered the 1 meter and 5 meter long chain sword, which was tucked under his arm. Then he put on a black cap and mask, stepped out of the house. Brooklyn, the middle section of the tunnel with constant traffic. After Rorschach parked his motorcycle, he stood at the entrance of the maintenance channel. His eyes darted around. Rorschach found a large chain of rusty chains that had been broken. It was thrown to the ground casually, facing the dark passage with the door open. A cold breath kept coming, brushing against his face. Rorschach raised his hand and grasped the hilt of the chainsword. At the same time, he also opened the zipper of his jacket, so that he can draw the plasma pistol from its holster. Then an expressionless Rorschach walked into the passage. Take a few steps in a row. Rorschach stood at the entrance of the cave and quickly adapted to the change in light. He squinted his eyes and took in the surroundings inside. The interior of the passage is about 3 meters high and 2 meters wide. The entire road stretches straight. Every few meters, emergency lights with yellow lights have been turned on. All the way leads to a dark place with dim light. At this time, the stern-looking Rorschach tore off the sheets wrapped around the chain sword and threw it onto the wet ground. Then he held the chain sword in one hand. Moved forward inward with steady steps. Walked about 20 meters. The only corner of the straight passage appeared in front of Rorschach. Rorschach listened carefully. Then he turned his steps and stepped in sideways. However, the moment Rorschach turned the corner, whoosh, from the shadows deeper in the passage, a stone the size of a fist suddenly flew out. Uozia's eyes narrowed. The chain sword was subconsciously raised up and held horizontally in front of him. Boom! The collision of metal and stone made a loud noise. The flying stone suddenly hit the top of the passage and then fell to the ground. At this moment, a man with a height of over 1.9 meters appeared. Between the sharply curved body surfaces, the blonde woman completely covered by a layer of silver metal is revealed. The response was good, but unfortunately it was just good. The blonde woman seemed to be complimenting. It seemed like he was just laughing at Rorschach's overestimation. Are you Rorschach? Immediately afterwards, the woman wearing silver armor asked with cold eyes and an indifferent tone, mercenary? Or agent? Rorschach was silent. His eyes traveled over the blonde woman's tall frame, a silver metal armor covering the whole body, and that delicate face full of Slavic features. Rorschach, who squinted his eyes, took a deep breath and said slowly, "You're not just an ordinary person who loves life. Are you the real leader of the sportswear gang?" Before she finished speaking, the tall body of the blonde woman swayed slightly, and she sneered. Her eyes seemed to be full of disdain. "I'm not interested in your personal grudges. I'll only ask you once, where is Sergei?" "Ah, I understand." However, facing the blonde woman's question, Rorschach suddenly sighed. "It's just a personal grudge." In an instant, Rorschach suddenly switched the chainsaw sword to his left hand. His right hand drooped slightly and his fingertips were ready to move. Unfortunately, the blonde woman seemed to have misunderstood Rorschach's actions. It may also be that she trusted the defensive ability of her silver armor too much. She glanced at the chainsaw sword in Rorschach's hand with a flickering look in her eyes, and said jokingly, "Young man, times have changed. A mere cold weapon can't give you any comfort." At the same time, the blonde woman with cold eyes raised her palm, and her fingers covered with silver metal slowly clenched into fists. Now is the age of technology, the age of wisdom. Do you think Tony Stark is the only one in the world who has high-tech armor? Too naive. A fanatical smile appeared at the corner of the blonde woman's mouth. The arm wrapped in silver metal swung violently. The metal armor on the whole body made a cold noise of mechanical structure friction. This turned out to be a powerful set of technological armor. The blonde woman took a deep breath and repeated, "One last question, where is Sergei?" But the next moment, Rorschach, with his eyes narrowed, suddenly smiled. He stared at the other party with a sincere expression and said, "Times have changed? Times have changed." Before the voice fell, Rorschach took out the plasma pistol like lightning and pulled the trigger. American EI pistol drawing technique. Bang bang bang. Blue light balls the size of a human head surged out and shot at the blonde woman. In a flash, the dazzling hot plasma covered most of the passage, like a violent flood that broke through the dam, sweeping everything in front of it. Then Rorschach, with an indifferent look in his eyes, actually let go of the plasma pistol without hesitation and let the weapon fall. His muscles suddenly swelled. He followed the terrifying plasma wave closely and charged forward. At the same time, Rorschach, holding the hilt tightly with both hands, also pressed the switch of the motor. Boom, boom, boom. In an instant, the roar of the chainsaw sword exploding once again resounded through the world. Chapter 32-32032. Jigsaw. The hot plasma gets closer to the target. The volume expands more and more. Almost half of the passage is covered. The edge of the plasma frenzy melted parts of the walls. Wisps of dark red magma dripped down. At the same time, even if the plasma is not really close yet, extreme heat, distorting the air, has also arrived. The exposed fair skin of the blonde woman suddenly became chapped and her golden hair was on fire. Just for a moment, she completely put away her arrogance. Only shock and fear are left. Plasma weapons? At the moment of life and death, the blonde woman crushed the ground with force. The whole person jumped back, tried to use the powerful power of the silver armor to dodge. Unfortunately, the terrifying plasma is like a tidal wave. The spread speed is also much faster than human nervous reaction. Laugh in the blink of an eye, the blonde woman's foot and part of her calf that she couldn't retract in time instantly vaporized. Even the silver armor she was proud of couldn't withstand the high-temperature plasma of thousands of degrees. She didn't even have time to feel the pain. He could only rely on his survival instinct to struggle desperately. Just as the blonde woman's body was about to fall, she used her only remaining foot to crush the ground again and tried her best to dodge backwards. At this moment, tiles of blue plasma balls exploded completely. The extreme high temperature instantly melted the floor and walls of the passage. A small dark red magma lake quickly formed. Boom, boom, boom. However, the high temperature that distorted the air did not wait for it to dissipate. Accompanied by the deafening roar of the motor, a tall figure holding a chainsword jumped over the lava lake. The soles of his shoes began to melt and burn. Even the clothes and pants on his body were emitting bursts of smoke. The chain sword tilted as hard as possible in his hand scraped the top of the passage, leaving dents that were several inches deep. At this moment, the ferocious-looking Rorschach looked like a terrifying demon that had broken out of the burning hell. At this moment, the blonde woman's once fair and delicate appearance was completely damaged. Only pieces of cracked flesh and blood were left. All the blonde hair on his head had also disappeared. Large and small blisters and ulcers remained. One of her eyes also seemed to be blinded by the heat. The remaining eyes are full of endless pain and despair. Roar. Then there was a roar that resounded through the passage. Rorschach held a roaring chain sword and slashed hard on the shaky blonde woman with only one leg left. Ka-ka-ka. Rorschach gritted his teeth and pressed down hard on the chain sword that struck from his left shoulder. The saw teeth composed of single molecular blades rotate rapidly. The roaring chainsword cut through butter like a hot knife. Not only did it easily saw through the so-called high-tech armor, it also instantly embedded itself into the opponent's flesh and bones. Laugh. Countless blood spattered out instantly and fell on Liu Ozia's body. Because the injury was too serious. The blonde woman, who had been confused for a long time, couldn't help but let out a miserable howl and seemed to wake up. She subconsciously raised her arms to fight back. Unfortunately, the ferocious-looking Liu Ozia didn't give her any chance. Under the spray of blood, he actually sawed the blonde woman's tall body in half with his roaring chainsword. Click! The chainsword that was still roaring was inserted into the ground with the rotation of its saw teeth. Boom! Colorful internal organs and other human body parts. Along with the sound of the blonde woman splitting into two and falling to the ground, there were many sounds. Taking a deep breath, Rorschach forcefully pulled out the chain sword with its teeth still rotating from the ground. The fingertips moved slightly and the roar of the motor was completely extinguished. It was only at this moment that Rorschach, who had relaxed, felt the stinging pain in his feet. He looked down and saw that the shoes on both feet were almost burned. The soles of the feet inside cannot withstand the burning temperature. The skin was red, hot and had many blisters. His Rorschach couldn't help but gasp. He quickly took off his still hot shoes and stood barefoot on the warm ground. Sometimes, being too involved in fighting is not a good thing. Rorschach squinted his eyes, shook his head and sighed. 5 minutes later, the pain in Rorschach's feet gradually subsided. He held the chain sword and turned his head to glance at the magma lake that was emitting dark red heat, and the plasma pistol that fell on the opposite side. Then, his eyes swept across the messy woman's body. Rorschach decided to deal with these matters later. He turned and walked deeper into the passage. The blonde woman, whose name was not even revealed, was dead. but it remains to be seen whether Eugene is dead or alive. At the end of the entire passage is a small room where tools and equipment are stored. Today, it's empty. There was only a dim emergency light on in a corner near the passage. Just under the dim light, one was completely stripped naked. The tall man, whose hands were chained to the water pipe, huddled on the wet ground full of water stains. At this time, Eugene was lying under a faucet. Drops of water kept falling on the pale-skinned face. His eyes were closed, unresponsive. He seemed to have been subjected to extremely painful waterboarding and mental abuse and humiliation. Rorschach stepped forward quickly and found that Eugene's chest was still heaving. Bam! He swung the chainsaw sword and cut off the chain that locked Eugene's wrist. Eugene was like a rag doll that had been discarded. He fell directly to the ground and did not wake up. Rorschach dragged Eugene to the side with one hand. He checked carefully and confirmed that Eugene had fallen into a deep coma. This was not something he could help. Eugene needed medical assistance. Rorschach looked down at the blood splattered all over his body, and then looked at the water pipe that was still dripping. Rorschach took off his clothes and began to clean the blood everywhere. At the same time, his eyes fell on Eugene's clothes scattered around not far away. About an hour later, the lava lake was completely cooled and Rorschach successfully recovered the plasma pistol of the unhappy machine soul. He wanted to collect the silver armor of the blonde woman to see if it could be used, but he found that the sod armor was completely damaged and worthless. Feeling that he had lost 100 million, Rorschach placed the bloody clothes that needed to be destroyed near the corpse with an expressionless face. He took out the plasma pistol again and pulled the trigger. Swish, the plasma ball gushed out. It completely covered the corpse on the ground and everything around it. After confirming that the corpse was destroyed, Rorschach, with an expressionless face, carried Eugene, who was still unconscious in his underwear. The traffic outside the passage was still busy. Rorschach picked up the bedsheet he had thrown away before and wrapped the chainsaw sword again. Then, he patiently waited for time to pass. Just checked Eugene's condition from time to time, until the sky gradually darkened and the traffic became sparse. Rorschach disguised the unconscious Eugene as a drunk friend and took him to a public telephone booth on a motorcycle. He contacted the hospital ambulance and waited until he heard the ambulance siren. Rorschach held the chainsaw sword under his armpit and rode away on the lamb. Chapter 33-33033. The Blood Army of Corn? Rorschach returned home as if he had just completed a simple task. Google search reading. It's really simple in a sense. It's just sawing a person open. Unfortunately, Eugene's unexpected encounter and coma. This also brought Rorschach's resource replenishment plan to a standstill again. Rorschach decided to try the number he had obtained from a private gun dealer. See if you can establish a basic connection with the other person. However, before Rorschach could take action, early the next morning, Rorschach planned to go to the restaurant with his aunt to clean up the housework, but unexpectedly received a strange phone call. Rorschach answered with a frown. Only then did they realize that Eugene, who was in a deep coma, actually woke up, and he was contacted through the nurse's cell phone. Rorschach hesitated for a moment, still decided to take a wad of money and go to the hospital to visit Eugene. After all, the other party is also a friend who helps him get information. Brooklyn Hospital. Rorschach came to the emergency reception desk. After a brief inquiry, a black nurse on duty informed Eugene of the location of his ward. At the same time, it means that the other party is waiting for a visit. However, the patient needs to rest, not for too long. After Rorschach expressed his thanks, he was about to turn around. But I overheard another white nurse whispering gossip. Last night, a man who was sent for treatment woke up from a coma. I had a nervous breakdown and cried for hours. The whole person is like a child who has been greatly wronged and stimulated. Rorschach couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. It seems that Eugene's torture in the past few days has been very difficult. However, wait until Rorschach finds Eugene's hospital room. After he pushed the door open and entered, he saw a completely different Eugene than he had imagined. I saw Eugene sitting on the hospital bed wearing a neck brace, his back straight. His eyes were staring straight ahead, although his overall mental state was sluggish. The eyes that occasionally show up are different from before, brighter. Hi Rorschach. Eugene, who was in a daze, saw Rorschach entering the door at a glance. He suddenly showed a bright smile and waved hello excitedly. Do you need to call the doctor? Rorschach, who squinted his eyes, stared at Eugene, who had undergone tremendous changes in temperament and behavior, and couldn't help but say, Eugene, I feel something is not right with you. It's okay. Rorschach, this is not your problem. I have indeed changed a lot from the inside out, but I think this is a good thing. Eugene maintained a bright smile on his face. He blinked a few times and said clearly, although I don't quite remember what happened to me these days, I know it was probably you who saved me. I still remember what you asked me for help before, so, in order to repay your life-saving grace, I have found a suitable candidate for you through my friend's connections, Aaron Davis from Queens. He can provide you with more help. Before he finished speaking, the smiling Eugene took out a note from under the pillow and handed it to Rorschach. This is his contact information. I have already informed him in advance for you. You need to negotiate the specific quantity and price yourself. Rorschach looked at Eugene repeatedly. He took the note anyway and put it in his pocket. Then he took out a wad of cash. Planned to put it in front of Eugene. However, Rorschach's actions attracted Eugene's rejection. Eugene tried to lift his chin, and a faint glow seemed to appear on his still pale and swollen face. He said to Rorschach with a sincere expression, "I'm contacting you because you saved my life. I used to be a school bully who bullied others. I'm not a real bad guy, but I'm not a good guy either, Rorschach. I want to be a truly good guy in the future. The origin of every penny must be clean, so please fulfill my wish." Hearing Eugene's words, Rorschach frowned. After a moment, he shook his head and took back the money. At the same time, he smiled lightly and said, "Eugene, I hope you can succeed and become a good person." After saying that, Rorschach turned and left. Just when he was about to step out of the ward door, suddenly he turned around and said, "By the way, Eugene, don't work in Manhattan for at least a year. Brooklyn and Queens are fine too. If you believe me, then believe me. If you don't, forget it. Goodbye." Rorschach said goodbye and left the ward. Only a confused Eugene was left sitting on the hospital bed in a daze. Later, Rorschach left the ward. The first thing he did was to advance the bill for Eugene's ward, and reserved his phone number. When Rorschach stepped out of the hospital, he couldn't help but sigh. Eugene was probably in extreme fear and pain. There are quite a few personality problems. Even if Rorschach is not a psychiatrist, you can also detect some clues. But this is for the former Eugene. Whether it is good or bad cannot be evaluated. Rorschach, who squinted his eyes, sat on the little sheep. He took out the note, took a look at it, and dialed the phone without hesitation. After a short waiting tone, the call was connected. A male voice with an obvious black accent reached Rorschach's ears. "Who? Aaron Davis? I'm Eugene's friend. Has he told you?" Rorschach had a brief conversation with the other party, and agreed to make the first transaction in 3 days. If everything goes well, the two sides will maintain long-term cooperation. And faced with the wholesale price of 250 yuan for a brand new gun, Rorschach still chose the old gun that the other party said was 100 yuan. Old guns are all murder weapons with criminal records. In any case, the simulator will not let go of any firearm that can be fired. Long guns and short guns are recovered in 1 hour, so Rorschach naturally hopes that the source of goods is as cheap as possible. Finally, the resource issue is settled. Rorschach is obviously much more excited. He took a last glance at the hospital and started the motorcycle. After nightfall, Rorschach, who had packed up everything, lay down on the bed with peace of mind. He patiently opened the simulator that had been waiting for many days. Simulation starting. Current identity: Kadashan recruit, Krieg Grenadier. Please choose your identity first. If you refuse, you will be randomly assigned. Identity selection has been refused. Simulation starting. You have descended into the Warhammer universe. Time 41. Location: Galaxy Unknown Star Region Rune V. You have descended onto the surface of the planet. You find yourself in a land of ice and snow, surrounded by countless snowflakes. You don't have time to feel the biting cold. You hear the familiar roar of the infernal gun and the whine of the laser gun firing desperately. You look in the direction of the sound and see a Chaos Space Marine with a body of 2 meters and 3 meters tall, with horns and skulls hanging all over his blood-red power armor, who has just torn a mortal soldier alive and is bathing in hot blood in the hail of bullets. Chapter 34-34034. Saving the Emperor Part 1. Before you can curse, the Khorne Berserker with a pair of rabbit ears on his blood-red helmet has already locked onto you with his auspicious instrument. You try to pull your legs out of the knee-thick snow and fight back. Google search reading. The screaming Khorne Berserker throws down the corpse, raises the terrifying chainsaw axe, and charges towards you. You try to pick up a fallen laser gun and pull the trigger desperately. The scorching laser that is enough to annihilate flesh and blood only adds a few small dents to the Khorne Berserker's power armor. You are less than 5 meters away from the Khorne Berserker. The roar from the turning teeth of the chainsaw axe shakes your eardrums, and the stench of blood stimulates your nasal cavity. You fall into despair. You squeeze the trigger tightly, trying to cause an overload of the laser gun battery, trying to cause some damage to the opponent before dying. You regretted not praying to the Emperor for protection before you descended. You are about to be torn into pieces and you are on the verge of death. At the critical moment, an orange-red hot melt that melted a large piece of snow penetrated the power backpack of the Khorne Berserker, causing an extremely violent explosion. At this moment, the roaring chainsaw axe was only half a meter away from you. You were blown away by the terrifying shockwave in front of you. You spurted blood from your mouth and nose, and you were dizzy and about to fall into a coma. Before your eyes closed, you vaguely saw that several elite soldiers wearing closed helmets stood up from the heavy snow 10 meters away. Each of them held a powerful infernal gun and fired an execution-style shot at the Khorne berserker who was not dead yet and was still screaming. Every shot hit the opponent's rabbit ear helmet and completely melted the opponent's head. You fell into darkness and passed out. You were seriously injured but barely survived. You gradually woke up from your coma and you found that the pain from your internal organs had disappeared. You tried to get up and check the environment, but a hoarse male voice stopped you. You turned your head and looked at the snow cave built of ice and snow. A bearded man wearing a carapace was repairing and assembling a purgatory gun. He was still chewing rations in his mouth, and the residue was all over his brown beard. You first thanked him for saving you, and then expressed your loyalty to the Emperor. The bearded man did not raise his head. After swallowing the food in his mouth, he said that it was your courage that saved you. You were able to pull the trigger in the face of the Chaos Astartes charge, showing enough loyalty. You wanted to get up and continue communicating with the bearded man, but before you opened your mouth, a relatively warm ration was thrown into your arms. You were so hungry that you ate without expressing your gratitude. The bearded man stopped repairing, stared at you who were eating voraciously, and gave you two choices. Return to the Imperial base, and you will definitely be warmly welcomed by the 412th Cadian Blitz Regiment and the friendly hospitality from the Inquisition. Or accept the order from General Stoon and follow them to carry out a difficult mission that may not return. Death becomes commonplace. Khorne berserkers are just appetizers, the green-skinned orcs who are waiting to fight are your dance partners, and the pointed ears in the shadows will accompany you into sleep if you can survive until the next day. You did not hesitate and chose to carry out the mission. The bearded man frowned and asked you why you chose this. The threats of the Inquisition are ineffective against you, and the Cadian Blitz Regiment will protect your life. You described your past combat experience vaguely. When the other party heard that you had joined the Krieg Death Legion and the Valhalla Ice Legion, the hesitation in his eyes gradually turned into shock. The bearded man chose to believe your words and thought that you were the Emperor's messenger. You stared at the other party's increasingly fiery fighting spirit and did not refute. On the first day, you followed the bearded man to get to know the other team members. This is a 6-man combat team. The bearded man is a sergeant and also the commander of the team. You obtained several sets of bloodstained Cadian standard camouflage uniforms, and their owners belonged to those Cadian soldiers who offered their loyalty. You changed into clothes without disdain to resist the ubiquitous cold. You obtained a laser gun and 3 fragmentation grenades from the bearded sergeant. You tried to get more weapons from the other party. The other team members laughed in a low voice, and the bearded sergeant had to explain to you. The mission time is tight. If you choose to join the team, you must become a heavy-duty soldier. It will be your responsibility to carry more weapons and equipment. You did not hesitate and gladly accepted the position. You think you were just a currency of the Emperor and do not need any preferential treatment. The next day, your team was surrounded by a group of green-skinned orcs. They are from the notorious Goth clan, a group of terrifying greenskins who love close combat and long-handled grenades. They are stronger and taller than ordinary greenskins. Faced with the sudden attack, the team you joined showed an extremely efficient fighting method and a tacit understanding full of discipline. You lie prone in the snow, and before you can take off your supplies and equipment, the battle is over. While cleaning the battlefield, you can't help but ask about the true origins of the team out of curiosity. The bearded sergeant smiled but said nothing, and a young team member proudly said, "They are the elite of the Cadian Blitzkrieg and the supreme glory of the Cadian people. They are Kashijin." On the third day, the snow covered the sky and the earth, and the team was safe. The journey was difficult, and you were exhausted by the heavy supplies. The team members wanted to share your weight, but you firmly refused. You think they need to maintain their combat effectiveness and face more dangerous enemies. And you also discovered that you can recover from fatigue and injuries through sleep, which must be the blessing from the Emperor. The team rested, and the bearded sergeant entered your snow pit and told you the real mission of this trip. Not long ago, an Emperor-class Titan, Dominatus, fell on this planet. This is one of the most powerful weapons of the Empire and the most precious creation of the Mechanicus. It cannot afford any loss. The Kashijin team you joined is just one of many teams. More Imperial teams are on the way to rescue. You have proved your loyalty again through the hard work of the past few days. The Sergeant Major hopes that you will prepare yourself mentally in advance and be ready for battle at any time. Your team will face an extremely tragic and terrifying war. In the first week, you adapted to the cold environment with your strong recovery ability. You began to ask the bearded sergeant major and other team members about Kashijin's combat skills and battlefield experience. Everyone in the team looked at each other, envious of your strong physical strength and energy. You gradually learned how to deal with the killing techniques of Chaos Space Marines and green-skinned orcs. For example, when facing a Khorne Berserker, you need to use hot melt to wash your hair. When facing a large number of greenskins, you need to kill the leader of the orcs first. In the second week, the team reached a vast forest covered with ice and snow with difficulty. Intelligence from the Imperial garrison shows that you are about to reach the location where the Emperor-class Titan Dominatus fell. The bearded sergeant major asks you to be vigilant and replenish your physical strength and ammunition. You unloaded your supplies and equipment and calculated the amount to be distributed to everyone. Suddenly, a slight sound of breaking through the air sounded in your ears. A sharp substance as crystal clear as crystal pierced the supply box in front of you, destroying most of the supplies. You instantly recognized that this was the standard weapon from the Eldar, the ammunition fired by the Star Dart launcher. Enemy attack, you shouted at the top of your voice. Chapter 35 Saving the Emperor Part 2 The elite Kashizin team reacts faster than you. As soon as your warning came out, the sergeant major's hell gun roared fiercely. Scorching lasers spurted out and penetrated the surrounding forest. The other team members dispersed into position, and the melt and lasers were shot out one after another, reflecting on the snow. In the forest facing the sergeant major, a slender white figure 2 meters tall jumped out of the shadows, dodging the hail of bullets. You tried to aim and shoot with the laser gun, but found that your sight could not lock on the opponent's flexible and agile figure. You took out a few frag grenades and planned to use large-scale damage to force the opponent to stop. You pulled out the safety device and haven't thrown it yet. A few lines of obscure Imperial language suddenly popped out of the mouth of the slender figure. At the same time, it raised a palm and shook it back and forth, signaling a ceasefire between the two sides. The sergeant major did not choose to cease fire, but also signaled the rest of the team members to be more vigilant to prevent more heretics from appearing. The slender figure wearing a long and narrow helmet had no choice but to keep jumping and moving to avoid the laser rays, while stumbling to speak the language of the Empire. The other party stated that the destruction of materials was just a personal misjudgment. It comes from the Eldar, ordered by the Prophet Taldir to alert the Empire's allies. The green-skinned warlord Gorgas and the Chaos Lord Kroll have formed a terrifying alliance, which is about to pose a huge threat to the Imperial power. A large number of green-skinned orcs and Khorne Berserkers attacked the location of the Emperor-class Titan Dominatus. Your team needs assistance from the Eldar. The sergeant major dismissed this, and the hell gun roared more frequently. You took the opportunity to throw a few fragmentation grenades, but the slender figure wearing white armor jumped behind the tall trees with the impact of the explosion and lost track. The sergeant major stopped shooting. Instead of blaming you for taking action rashly, he praised you for your talent in becoming a senior grenadier. In the third week, your team finally arrived at the location of the Emperor-class Titan Dominatus. You look up and keep exclaiming in admiration. The towering Emperor-class Titan is simply a majestic building comparable to a large mountain range, and it is also a battle fortress with extremely terrifying firepower. Your team joined other teams that came to the rescue and received more supplies. The sergeant major learned through communication that the other teams also encountered warnings from the Eldar tribe. The team that mistakenly thought the opponent was an ally suffered a lot of losses. In addition to supplies and equipment, there are even lives of Imperial soldiers. After a short period of repair, you received a gift from the sergeant major. A set of carapace armor from other Kashizin squads, which will greatly improve your survivability on the battlefield. You didn't have time to express your gratitude to the other party. The roar of fierce laser guns and hell guns rang out all around. Countless traces of green skins gradually appeared on the edge of the forest, and the Khorne Berserkers, who were even more terrifying than the green skins, also revealed their tall figures. The battle to defend Dominatus has begun. In the fourth week, due to the lack of maintenance and comfort from the mechanical monks, the machine soul displeased Emperor-class Titan was unable to activate the Void Shield. Only the Hell Cannon and Laser Explosion Cannon installed on the building platform can be used. After a more powerful Plasma Annihilation Cannon vaporized a small group of Khorne Berserkers, it completely fell into a standby state and could not be fired. In order to prevent irreparable damage to the Emperor-class Titan Dominatus, all the teams that came to support had to collide head-on with the surging green-skinned orcs, maintaining a front line. Your team is also an important line of defense. The large number of Khorne Berserkers who appear among the greenskins seem to have identified you as their ultimate target. Every Khorne Berserker who spots you will let out a vague roar, as if they have momentarily forgotten the eye-catching Emperor Titan in the distance, charging towards you while shaking their rabbit ears. After experiencing an extremely terrifying scare, you survived by chance. You gradually regain your composure and formulate a plan with the Sergeant Major. Your squad will take advantage of your extraordinary attractiveness to the Berserkers of Khorne, guide them to destroy the Greenskins formation, and at the same time stay away from the Empire's front lines, waiting for opportunities to annihilate them. From this point on, a strange scene appeared on the battlefield between the Empire and the green-skinned orcs defending the Titans. As soon as the Khorne Berserker appears, you will bravely jump out of the battle line, throw grenades, or shoot to attract the opponent's attention. Each Khorne Berserker will roar and kill countless greenskins, and then charge towards you. Wait until the entire teams melt and laser fire accurately hit the opponent's head or power backpack, triggering a violent explosion and blowing up countless greenskins. Cold in a cold sweat, you frantically but calmly return to the rear of the Empire's defense line, replenishing ammunition and waiting for the next opportunity. In the 6th week, your team gradually entered a state of numbness and exhaustion, which led to some flaws in the plan. A severely injured, but not dead Berserker of Khorne breaks through the Imperial defense lines. While the enemy caused a large number of casualties, they also came to you for the first time. This time, you finally heard the vague roars from their mouths. Traitor, the enemy called you this with his helmet bursting and his brains flowing. You raised the hell gun and pierced the enemy's head. You were confused by this. Before you had time to think deeply, countless greenskins who broke through the front line had already come to you. In the 7th week, the Empire's rescue team suffered heavy casualties and had to retreat to the Emperor-class Titan Dominatus, relying on the remaining firepower weapons on the platform to resist. There are only 3 people left in your team, including you. The sergeant had half of his arm chopped off by the greenskin orcs, and he stubbornly resisted the enemy's offensive with only willpower. You subconsciously counted the remaining supplies of all the teams. You found that the entire rescue team was about to run out of ammunition and food. You tried to contact the Empire Station to request more support. You received General Storn's extremely sad reply. The Eldar heretics once again tore up the short-lived alliance and launched a frenzied attack on the Imperial base. The Cadian Blitzkrieg has no more teams to send out. He prays that the Emperor will bless you. You hung up the communication and fell silent. You picked up the hell gun again, intending to detonate the Emperor-class Titan Dominatus. If Dominatus cannot belong to the Lord of Mankind, then no force can get it. You muttered to yourself with cold eyes. Chapter 36, Beyond the Limits of the Human Body and the Traces of the God of Thunder. The battle situation on the ground is even more fierce, and your time is tight. You crawled into the narrow and dark maintenance passage of the Emperor-class Titan and entered the engine area. You need to detonate the important core, the plasma reactor, before the heretics have invaded Titan. You pass by wetware servitors one after another. The silent opponent has fallen into the arms of Om Messiah, the god of all opportunities. You vaguely sensed a hint of crisis and you quickly turned around wanting to pull the trigger. Sharp crystals from the shuriken ejector shot out from the shadow of the wetware servitor and penetrated deeply into the left half of your body. You forced yourself to endure the extreme physical pain and pulled the trigger of the hell gun. The scorching laser blasted away the bodies of countless servitors, revealing a slender figure wearing white armor in the shadows. The point-eared heretic from the Eldar tribe has infiltrated into the core of the Emperor-class Titan Dominatus at some point. You drag your severely injured body back reluctantly and a large amount of blood drains from your wounds. You are still 10 meters away from the plasma reactor chamber. The roar from the hell gun blocks the opponent's approach, and sharp crystals brush against your scalp from time to time. You have no fear of this, you only have the mission goal in mind. There are still 5 meters away from the plasma reactor, and the roaring hell gun is about to overload. You tore off a frag grenade with your blood-stained palm, removed the safety, and threw it at the opponent. You took advantage of the flames and impact of the explosion, and reluctantly dragged your seriously injured body into the plasma reactor cabin. You become dizzy and have trouble breathing. You lost too much blood. You leaned weakly against the plasma reactor and sat on the ground. You removed the safeties of all the grenades on your body, and pointed the muzzle of the hell gun at the entrance in front. You silently apologized to the Sergeant Major and the members of the team. You have lost too much blood and you are on the verge of death. You let go of the grenade and the hell gun roared again, about to overload. You saw the point-geared heretic dancing flexibly through your blurred vision, with a trace of ridicule showing at the corner of your mouth. Boom! The last sound came from your mouth. You were engulfed by the scorching explosion, and the impact and fire played a more magnificent and glorious movement. You are completely vaporized. You are dead. This simulation ended after 4 to 9 days. This simulation has a retainable option. 1. Emperor-class Titan Dominatus Operation Instructions Full Version 2. Empire Standard Infantry Ration Set 1 Week 3. Sergeant Major Kashizin's Combat Experience 1 month. This simulation time has exceeded 24 hours, and the simulator loss has not been exempted. Cooling time, 4 to 9 hours. Current available cooling time. 118 hours. Does it consume the cooling time? The cooling time has not been consumed, and the simulator enters natural cooling. Cooling can be waived at any time. Lying on the bed, Rorschach ended this simulation. When his eyes glanced at the first reward, my heart almost skipped a few beats. Until Rorschach discovered that it was just the operating instructions for the Emperor-class Titan Dominatus. He let out a sigh of relief. The raised back of his head fell into the soft pillow again. Rorschach knew the simulator wouldn't be so generous. His eyes fell on the third reward. There was a hint of joy in his eyes. Rorschach no longer hesitated and immediately chose 1 month of combat experience for Sergeant Major Kashizin. In an instant, Rorschach, lying on the bed, seemed to have entered a strange perspective of God. That was a precious life of training and fighting for the bearded Sergeant Major. It was also Rorschach's re-experience of Kashizin's training and battle. In an instant, with his eyes closed, Rorschach's bones and muscles all over his body once again underwent drastic changes. The growth of bone tissue accelerates, like the casting of tempered steel. Muscle tissue breaks and remodels like a tight, bulging rock. Even the surface layer of skin is tighter and firmer. It seems that ordinary cold weapons have lost their threat. Wait until all changes are complete. Rorschach's height has reached 1.85 meters, weighing over 100 kilograms. Rorschach, with infinite power surging throughout his body, could no longer sleep. There was a slight pressure between his waist and abdomen. The whole person jumped up from the bed. He landed on the ground quickly and lightly. At this moment, Rorschach believed it 100%. His strength and physical fitness have completely surpassed Captain America. Beyond the limits of the human body in this world. Rorschach looked excited and held the edge of the bed with the palms of his 2 hands. His arms didn't exert much force either, lifting the entire wooden bed easily. Boom! As the heavy wooden bed slowly fell to the ground, it made a crashing sound. Rorschach's excitement gradually faded. He squinted his eyes and glanced around the bedroom room, shaking his head slightly. He may need to find a real secret base. It is not convenient to continue living at home. The basement area is also too narrow. It can only be used temporarily. But every inch of land in Manhattan is at a premium. Other places are cheaper, but the journey is long. Moreover, the remaining 2 million funds are for the resources of the simulator and daily expenses. There is not much money left. Rorschach frowned slightly, and then he remembered something. He sat back on the bed and picked up his phone to search. Then, a faint smile appeared on Rorschach's face. New York is a century-old city with underground passages extending in all directions. Just choose a good location. Rorschach not only does not have to spend money, he can also use the subway passages and even sewers built by the municipal department to shuttle freely. After making a decision, Rorschach plans to take advantage of the free time before obtaining gun resources. Check out various maps and architectural drawings of New York. Find an underground secret base that suits his heart. Exit Google Chrome. Rorschach, who is still sleepless, lies back on the bed, brushing his phone to kill time. Several news messages that he accidentally brushed caught his sight. The first hot search on Twitter is that Iron Man Tony Stark is going to the Middle East again. Heroic deeds of killing terrorists and saving civilians. Rorschach continued to flip through the pages. Another piece of news about the frequent thunderstorms in New Mexico also caught his attention. Is Thor here? Rorschach frowned slightly with his eyes narrowed. A faint light flashed in the depths of his eyes. If I go to get Mjolnir, I wonder if I can do it? Maybe Ha Odin will slap me to death through the Rainbow Bridge? Doctor. Beheading, Master of Saw, and the Murderer Mister. Rorschach couldn't help but fall into reverie. Chapter 37-37036. Beyond the limits of the human body and the traces of Thor, the battle situation on the ground is even more fierce, and your time is tight. You crawled into the narrow and dark maintenance passage of the Emperor-class Titan and entered the engine area. You need to detonate the important core, the plasma reactor, before the heretics have invaded Titan. You pass by wetware servitors one after another. The silent opponent has fallen into the arms of Om Messiah, the god of all opportunities. You vaguely sensed a hint of crisis and you quickly turned around, wanting to pull the trigger. Sharp crystals from the shuriken ejector shot out from the shadow of the wetware servitor and penetrated deeply into the left half of your body. You forced yourself to endure the extreme physical pain and pulled the trigger of the Hell gun. The scorching laser blasted away the bodies of countless servitors, revealing a slender figure wearing white armor in the shadows. The point-eared heretic from the Eldar tribe has infiltrated into the core of the Emperor-class Titan Dominatus at some point. You drag your severely injured body back reluctantly and a large amount of blood drains from your wounds. You are still 10 meters away from the plasma reactor chamber. The roar from the Hell gun blocks the opponent's approach, and sharp crystals brush against your scalp from time to time. You have no fear of this, you only have the mission goal in mind. There are still 5 meters away from the plasma reactor, and the roaring hell gun is about to overload. You tore off a frag grenade with your blood-stained palm, removed the safety, and threw it at the opponent. You took advantage of the flames and impact of the explosion and reluctantly dragged your seriously injured body into the plasma reactor cabin. You become dizzy and have trouble breathing. You lost too much blood. You leaned weakly against the plasma reactor and sat on the ground. You removed the safeties of all the grenades on your body and pointed the muzzle of the hell gun at the entrance in front. You silently apologized to the sergeant major and the members of the team. You have lost too much blood and you are on the verge of death. You let go of the grenade and the hell gun roared again, about to overload. You saw the point-eared heretic dancing flexibly through your blurred vision, with a trace of ridicule showing at the corner of your mouth. Boom! The last sound came from your mouth. You were engulfed by the scorching explosion, and the impact and fire played a more magnificent and glorious movement. You are completely vaporized, you are dead. This simulation ended after 4 to 9 days. This simulation has a retainable option. 1. Emperor-class Titan Dominatus Operation Instructions Full Version 2. Empire Standard Infantry Ration Set 1 Week 3. Sergeant Major Kashizin's Combat Experience 1 month. This simulation time has exceeded 24 hours, and the simulator loss has not been exempted. Cooling time, 4 to 9 hours. Current available cooling time, 118 hours. Does it consume the cooling time? The cooling time has not been consumed, and the simulator enters natural cooling. Cooling can be waived at any time. Lying on the bed, Rorschach ended this simulation. When his eyes glanced at the first reward, my heart almost skipped a few beats. Until Rorschach discovered that it was just the operating instructions for the Emperor-class Titan Dominatus. He let out a sigh of relief. The raised back of his head fell into the soft pillow again. Rorschach knew the simulator wouldn't be so generous. His eyes fell on the third reward. There was a hint of joy in his eyes. Rorschach no longer hesitated and immediately chose 1 month of combat experience for Sergeant Major Kashizin. In an instant, Rorschach, lying on the bed, seemed to have entered a strange perspective of God. That was a precious life of training and fighting for the bearded Sergeant Major. It was also Rorschach's re-experience of Kashizin's training and battle. In an instant, with his eyes closed, Rorschach's bones and muscles all over his body once again underwent drastic changes. The growth of bone tissue accelerates, like the casting of tempered steel. Muscle tissue breaks and remodels like a tight, bulging rock. Even the surface layer of skin is tighter and firmer. It seems that ordinary cold weapons have lost their threat. Wait until all changes are complete. Rorschach's height has reached 1.85 meters. Weighing over 100 kilograms. Rorschach, with infinite power surging throughout his body, could no longer sleep. There was a slight pressure between his waist and abdomen. The whole person jumped up from the bed. He landed on the ground quickly and lightly. At this moment, Rorschach believed it 100%. His strength and physical fitness have completely surpassed Captain America. Beyond the limits of the human body in this world, Rorschach looked excited and held the edge of the bed with the palms of his 2 hands. His arms didn't exert much force either, lifting the entire wooden bed easily. Boom! As the heavy wooden bed slowly fell to the ground, it made a crashing sound. Rorschach's excitement gradually faded. He squinted his eyes and glanced around the bedroom room, shaking his head slightly. He may need to find a real secret base. It is not convenient to continue living at home. The basement area is also too narrow. It can only be used temporarily. But every inch of land in Manhattan is at a premium. Other places are cheaper, but the journey is long. Moreover, the remaining 2 million funds are for the resources of the simulator and daily expenses. There is not much money left. Rorschach frowned slightly, and then he remembered something. He sat back on the bed and picked up his phone to search. Then, a faint smile appeared on Rorschach's face. New York is a century-old city with underground passages extending in all directions. Just choose a good location. Rorschach not only does not have to spend money, he can also use the subway passages and even sewers built by the municipal department to shuttle freely. After making a decision, Rorschach plans to take advantage of the free time before obtaining gun resources. Check out various maps and architectural drawings of New York. Find an underground secret base that suits his heart. Exit Google Chrome. Rorschach, who is still sleepless, lies back on the bed, brushing his phone to kill time. Several news messages that he accidentally brushed caught his sight. The first hot search on Twitter is that Iron Man Tony Stark is going to the Middle East again. Heroic deeds of killing terrorists and saving civilians. Rorschach continued to flip through the pages. Another piece of news about the frequent thunderstorms in New Mexico also caught his attention. Is Thor here? Rorschach frowned slightly with his eyes narrowed. A faint light flashed in the depths of his eyes. If I go to get Mjolnir, I wonder if I can do it? Maybe Ha-Odin will slap me to death through the Rainbow Bridge? Doctor. Beheading, Master of Saw, and the Murderer Mr. Rorschach couldn't help but fall into reverie. Chapter 38-38037. New changes in the simulator. Rorschach wants to prepare to build a secret base. Once again, the complexity of New York City's century-old legacy was underestimated. There is only some brief information about underground passages on the internet. There are not even a few complete drawings. More detailed drawings. Individuals are required to apply for inquiries at the New York City Library. So Rorschach set off to the library to continue exploring. He pretended to be a university architecture student who needed information for his graduation project. This resulted in enthusiastic help from the librarian. This is a young and beautiful white girl. She wears braids, her face is dotted with freckles, and her figure is unusually plump. From the moment Rorschach entered the door, she took Rorschach's thick arm and asked him questions very thoughtfully. After figuring out Rorschach's purpose, the other party even personally led the way to the basement of the library. Rorschach, who encountered a similar situation for the first time, was immediately at a loss. The girl's charming eyes occasionally glanced at the bulging muscles holding up his clothes all over his body. The whole person looked like a succubus with two horns, wanting to eat him in one bite. Rorschach could only maintain a cold expression, prevent the other party from harassing him deeply. How to deal with affection from the opposite sex is not something he is good at. Killing heretics and cutting down chaos is his specialty. Simply, the white girl named Felicia didn't bother Rorschach too much. After helping Rorschach find the place, she just tentatively asked for Rorschach's mobile phone number. Rorschach hesitated slightly, still readily gave his Twitter account. It protects the fragile and sensitive thoughts of adolescent girls. Mr. Rorschach, the beheading doctor. He's actually a gentle and delicate young man at heart. Unfortunately, it was not until Rorschach said goodbye to the girl. After turning around and entering the basement, he stared at the neatly stacked mountains of drawings in front of him. He couldn't help but let out a low moan. I hate drawing data the most. A few hours later, even though Rorschach searched desperately, he finally found the underground drawings from the 1990s. If Rorschach wanted to find drawings from recent years, I'm afraid it will take a lot of time. Rorschach, who was still physically strong, sighed. Then an idea gradually popped out of his mind. Should he choose to sacrifice his appearance? Go treat Felicia, the librarian, to a candlelight dinner? So that the other party can be happy and want to help? New York, Queens. Rorschach facing the spring breeze, riding his beloved little sheep through the crowds. Busy neighborhood with heavy traffic. He was about to head to an agreed-upon hiding place. Conducted the first law-abiding no-killing gun transaction. The location was one Aaron Davis chose. Be cautious about the other person. Instead of being angry, Rorschach was very appreciative. But before you step out of the house, Rorschach still brought the plasma pistol that had gone through a traditional ceremony and offered incense. Just in case. Although now he can crush the heads of ordinary people with just one hand. But Master Summon has a kind heart. The horrific and twisted state of death cannot be seen. It is better to make all living beings equal and evaporate with one shot. Rorschach's little sheep parked a block away from the transaction. Just when Rorschach leaned over to lock the car and just stood up on nearby streets, a young boy out shopping with his mother saw the muscular Rorschach. The little boy's face flushed with excitement. There was a gleam of light in his eyes. I couldn't help but let out a loud sigh of praise. Mr. Big, you are so tall. Aunt, I will grow into a giant in the future too. Excuse me, sir. The black-haired woman holding the little boy gave an apologetic smile to Rorschach, who turned his gaze. Rorschach shook his head slightly to express his understanding. Then, he smiled and said to the little boy, "Hey, kid, you have to work hard to eat, exercise, and be obedient, and study well to succeed." Before he finished speaking, Rorschach nodded to the black-haired woman again, then turned and left. The black-haired woman looked at Rorschach's broad back curiously and blinked a few times. Then, she lowered her head and said to the jumping little boy, "Peter, did you hear that? Picky eaters don't make you healthy." Hear the brunette's words. The little boy's face almost wrinkled up. He muttered, "Auntie, your cooking is really terrible." Peter Parker. What did you just say? Oh, I mean, Aunt, your cooking is the best. I am a good boy who is not picky about food. I will become a giant in the future. The chatty little boy and the black-haired woman were getting farther and farther away. Eventually disappeared into the streets. At this time Rorschach, who had already left, was repeatedly identified. Finally, in a secluded neighborhood, found a defunct shop called Wandering. This is the transaction place agreed upon by both parties. Rorschach glanced around vigilantly, stepped forward and knocked on the rolling shutter door. The rhythm of each of his strokes is different in length. Ding! Immediately afterwards, Rorschach's cell phone rang and received a new message. Back door. Luozia raised his eyebrows slightly. Instead, he turned around and went to the back door of the closed store. Before he could knock on the closed back door, kakaka, the rusty iron door suddenly opened. A young black man with wary eyes glanced at Rorschach. After observing the surrounding environment again, he turned his head to signal. Come on, friend. Rorschach ducked inside and took stock of the internal environment. Just in the dim light shining in and the floating dust, wooden boxes were piled on the ground. A handful of guns shining with cold luster were revealed inside. Only you? Rorschach, who squinted his eyes, looked at the black man Aaron and said, Aren't you afraid that I will take advantage of others? First of all, this is just a small business introduced by Eugene, and it's not worth your while, Aaron. A black man with a calm expression spoke as fast as a flood coming out of a sluice gate. Unexpectedly, it has a rap rhythm. Secondly, I am just a law-abiding businessman. These guns are just gang guns collected at low prices. I have never participated in criminal matters. Even if you are a policeman, I have nothing to fear. I like your directness and candor. Rorschach nodded and smiled. He took out 3 thick wads of banknotes from his arms. It was handed to the black man Aaron. However, Aaron, the black man, frowned slightly. Staring at Rorschach, he said, There are only 200 black guns here for now. According to the price of 100 yuan, 20,000 yuan is enough. The next deposit is also a bargaining chip to increase trust. Rorschach kept smiling and said, I said, this is a long-term business, and the more guns, the better. Aaron, the black man, nodded and casually took the cash given by Rorschach. He was about to turn around and leave. Suddenly he turned around and asked, Do you need me to find someone to help you transport it? Don't worry, the service is free. No, my people will come and transport it away. Rorschach shook his head and refused. In fact, no gun can escape the simulator's appetite. When Aaron, the black man, left, Rorschach waited quietly for a while. After discovering that nothing was happening, Rorschach couldn't help but rub his hands. Action to replenish resources began. Hazardous substances found. Guns 1 hour. Hazardous substances found. Guns 1 hour. Wait until Rorschach has extracted all the guns. His cooldown time exceeded 318 hours for the first time. Indescribable satisfaction. However, just when Rorschach was mumbling to himself, the simulator in front of me suddenly changed. Chapter 39-39038, Space Shipwreck. Salvage resource time has exceeded 300 hours. Google search reading the simulator has enabled new features starting Space Hulk. Salvage note. A Space Hulk is a vast amalgam of countless wrecked battleships fused with other wreckage. They have been wandering through the boundless universe and even subspace for tens of thousands of years, and any force that enters the investigation will suffer huge losses. However, under the many crises, there are also countless forgotten precious items, including some terrifying creations that can easily destroy planets, and even galaxies. Current number of salvages, 0. Remaining number of salvages, 0. Whether to spend the cooling time to obtain the number of salvages proportion, 1 hour is equal to 1 salvage. Well, Uozia frowned slightly. After he glanced at the introduction of the new features of the simulator fell into silence. The simulator thinks it consumes resources too slowly, so it comes to cut leaks, right? Isn't this just a card drawing routine in mobile games? Rorschach is 100% sure that the simulator's new features don't even have a guarantee. If resources become abundant in the future, he might actually give it a try, but no way now. With so much cooling time, wouldn't it be nice if he used it directly for simulation? Having said that, Rorschach still spent an hour to redeem a salvage count. Just support the emulator, so as not to displease the machine's soul. Current number of salvages, 1 countdown to the end of salvage, 59 minutes and 59 seconds. Fine. Rorschach couldn't help but smacked his mouth, shook his head and sighed. After discovering that salvage also takes time to complete, he became less and less interested in new features. Uozia turned around and left the abandoned store. After temporarily settling the resource channels, Rorschach plans to continue his great work in building a secret base. However, just as Rorschach left Queens and headed to the library, he received a call from his aunt. The recruitment GG posted a few days ago has already worked. After successfully attracting the recruiter, Rorschach needs to come to interview for verification. So Rorschach turned the car around and rushed towards Chinatown. Half an hour later, Rorschach arrived in front of the restaurant. Just entered the store. Rorschach saw a young man about 20 years old sitting on a chair chatting with his aunt. Rorschach stepped forward without speaking. The aunt stood up with a smile on her face and introduced to Uozia. Uozia, this is Lin Yu, an international student from Asia. He plans to work-study to lighten the burden on his family. He accidentally saw the recruitment GG posted by our restaurant and came in to ask. A young man named Lin Yu wears a pair of rimless glasses. He is tall and thin, with a student-like look on his face. After he saw Rorschach approaching, he quickly stood up and said hello. Hello. Luozia also smiled and nodded and asked the young man, Columbia University? New York University? Or New York Institute of Technology? Lin Yu smiled shyly. Rorschach nodded and his eyes fell on his aunt's smiling face. Aunt, have you told anyone about your salary and other matters? Auntie seems very happy today. There was always a cheerful smile on his face. After hearing Rorschach's question, she nodded quickly and said, as I said just now, Lin Yu usually needs to go to class and study, so it can only be regarded as a part-time job. I will try my best to compress the time for rest and study, and squeeze out free time to work. Lin Yu, who smiled shyly, seemed to be very eager for this job, and mustered up the courage to speak to Luozia. Apparently, he had discovered who the real decision-makers at the restaurant were. That's not necessary. You came to study abroad to further your studies. The restaurant is usually only busy during lunch, dinner, and holidays. Rorschach waved his hand and said with a smile, 3 hours of part-time work every day, 1.5 hours each at noon and evening. If you are willing to come during holidays, I can give you full-time and overtime pay. How about that? Lin Yu lowered his head slightly. It's like calculating the amount of salary you can get. That's good, I'm very satisfied. Thank you. Then, he raised his head and bowed slightly to Luozia and his aunt, expressing his gratitude. And Rorschach always liked polite people. He admired the young man in front of him more and more. After exchanging glances with her aunt, Luozia nodded and said, That's it. You are welcome to join the yummy restaurant. However, it has not opened yet. It will probably get busy in a few days. If you have time, you can come and get familiar with the environment. Don't worry, my aunt will definitely do it. Calculate your salary. So there was great joy between both parties. Auntie has a new tool man. Rorschach can also save some energy and do his own things. After Luozia exchanged contact information with Lin Yu proposed to come to the store again tomorrow morning, because there is really nothing to do in the restaurant. Luozia didn't care about this and readily agreed. Wait until the other person leaves. Rorschach also had no intention of going to the library for the time being. While chatting with his aunt, he reopened the simulator. Rorschach stared at the salvage above as time slowly passed. He would like to see the new features of the simulator. What on earth can he come up with? The young man Lin Yu walked quickly along the streets of Chinatown. His brows occasionally revealed a trace of joy and ease. He would occasionally stop to look at the goods displayed in the surrounding windows. Or he would accidentally look at the men and women passing by. Just like every new international student or tourist, Lin Yu was full of curiosity and exploration for all the unfamiliar things around him. Half an hour later, Lin Yu, who was strolling all the way, entered a supermarket. When he appeared again, in addition to a bag of snacks and drinks in his hand, there was also a disposable mobile phone. Lin Yu had a shy smile on his face. He pushed his frameless glasses and walked out of Chinatown with the bag. Next, Lin Yu seemed to be lost. He actually walked into a remote street. However, he did not choose to turn back. It seemed that he was enjoying the excitement of adventure. When Lin Yu entered a more secluded and deserted alley, his whole temperament suddenly changed dramatically. If Lin Yu was just a shy overseas student before, then Lin Yu now is a spear and sword tempered by the fire of war. Lin Yu, expressionless, exhaled lightly. He turned on the disposable mobile phone. His fingertips jumped, pressed a series of complicated and confusing numbers, and dialed out. About 10 seconds later, familiar language came into Lin Yu's ears. The hidden line has been connected and number 1 is waiting online. It's me, report the situation. A middle-aged male voice with a deep voice sounded from the phone. Lin Yu took a deep breath and said in his hometown dialect, Mr. Zhang, everything went well and has joined the target sphere of influence. Be careful in what you say and do, and if necessary, even at the cost of your life, you must protect the safety of the target's family. The middle-aged man's voice seemed to contain heaviness. Sir, the target seems to be just an ordinary person. Is it worth our efforts? Hearing the other party's words, Lin Yu's eyes hidden behind his glasses revealed some doubts. However, the middle-aged man on the other end of the phone seemed to fall into silence. Just when Lin Yu thought the hidden line had been disconnected, the middle-aged man's deep voice came again. Mr. Zhang Heng once predicted that if humans want to successfully kill gods, the target must be present. It must be him. Chapter 40 O Messiah, the Ancient Iron Man? Exclamation. The restless ant went to the back kitchen of the restaurant to clean up. Bored Rorschach had no choice but to hold a cup of scalding hot tea. He closed his eyes and fell asleep, waiting for the salvage time to be over. Countdown to the end of salvage. 10 seconds. Countdown to the end of salvage. 9 seconds. Rorschach opened his eyes and stared at the countdown that was about to end. For a moment, my thoughts were racing. He does know what the Space Hulk in Warhammer is. I'm just curious about what the simulator can salvage. Weapons and ammunition or ancient technological items? Or are they just expired supplies destined for other planets? However, if a gene stealer or Necron is salvaged, that would be great fun. Rorschach's eyelids couldn't help but twitch. At the same time, the simulator's salvage countdown is completely over. Countdown to the end of salvage. 0 salvage harvest. A dormant Iron Man. It turns out he's just an Iron Man. Fortunately, he's not a disgusting thing like a chicken thief. Rorschach, who didn't react at all, breathed a sigh of relief subconsciously, muttered to himself, etc. Immediately afterwards, Rorschach reacted suddenly. My eyes widened in an instant. His eyes were fixed on the simulator page and his breathing gradually became heavier. Hua. For a moment, Rorschach didn't even notice that the hot tea in his hand fell on him. Iron Man? Iron Man in the dark age of technology? The Iron Man who sparked the Iron Man rebellion and nearly destroyed humanity in the Golden Age? For a moment, Rorschach was in a state of shock and blinked his eyes repeatedly. Keep checking the salvage harvest on the simulator. I was wrong. I shouldn't have doubted the new capabilities of the simulator. Rorschach stood up suddenly. He clasped his hands and bowed slightly to the simulator page, trying to appease the machine spirit. Then Rorschach beamed with joy and once again launched a series of 10 rounds. It took 10 hours to redeem 10 salvage opportunities. Current number of salvages, 10. Countdown to the end of salvage, 9 hours, 59 minutes and 59 seconds. At this moment, the smile on Rorschach's face became even brighter. You know, this is an Iron Man. In the dark age of technology, the Stone Man, biochemical artificial man, created a powerful mechanical creation to serve the Golden Man, pure human beings. At the same time, the Iron Man rebellion initiated by Iron Man is also known as the second cruel and terrifying super war in the history of the galaxy right now. Rorschach, who kept exploring new features, made more new discoveries. The first is the harvest of salvage. If not attempted extraction, then it will always be stored on the page and does not hinder other functions. This undoubtedly brought great convenience to Rorschach. In addition, salvage harvests are actually labeled with information. It's just that Rorschach was too excited. Didn't notice salvage harvest. A dormant Iron Man note. Ancient Iron Man UR025 is tired of the cruel struggles in the past and just wants to enjoy the peace of freedom. Now, as a pacifist, it has no ill intentions towards humans. It plans to hide its identity and sneak into the intelligence control of the Adeptus Mechanicus after a short hibernation. Legion hiss. In an instant, Rorschach couldn't help but take a breath of air. This may be an ancient Iron Man who participated in the Iron Man rebellion. Should we let it out? Rorschach's expression changed back and forth. The excitement of just getting the Iron Man gradually faded away. Then, Rorschach, who was frowning, suddenly stood up. After he shouted in the direction of the kitchen. He ran out of the restaurant in a hurry. This kid, why has he been so busy lately? The aunt who heard the shouting stuck her head out of the kitchen. She glanced at the empty restaurant and couldn't help but shake her head and sigh. In an underground passage away from the crowd, Rorschach sat on the ground holding a plasma pistol in one hand. He held his chin with his other hand and thought. For him now, Iron Man is a very precious mechanical creation. With the presence of Iron Man, Rorschach can accomplish more things. At least if the Iron Man guards the house. Rorschach can then travel around the country or go abroad. The acquisition of gun resources alone does not have to be so troublesome, and the quantity obtained is also larger. Think of this. Rorschach made a quick decision and decided to release Iron Man. His location is one of the recent gains from looking through the drawings. A long-abandoned underground passage. If Rorschach discovers Iron Man is aggressive towards humans, then he plans to melt it with his plasma pistol. A plasma pistol wouldn't work either. Rorschach could only reluctantly part ways with her. Leave the crazy Iron Man to the superheroes. Hopefully Tony Stark's brilliant brain can handle it. Anyway, it doesn't matter if there is one more robot villain in a world where monsters, demons, and snakes are everywhere. It's just maybe scarier than Ultron. Rorschach, who was ready for battle, stood up from the ground and gripped the plasma pistol. The Emperor's blessing. Then he finished his short prayer. Shoes to get the harvest of salvage. In an instant, he was on the wet ground a few meters away. A 2-meter-tall metal skeleton with a black metallic luster appeared out of thin air. Rorschach, who had just hidden the plasma pistol behind his back, couldn't help but take a deep breath, and the whole person was extremely alert. At this time, a faint blue light gradually lit up in the eye sockets of the 2-meter-tall metal skeleton. an ancient mechanical creation from the Warhammer universe. Iron Man has revived. It first turned its metal head. It seemed to scan the surrounding environment. Finally, the pair of mechanical pupils flashing blue light slowly focused on Rorschach, whose face was tense. It slowly raised one arm and placed it in front of his chest. This action also made Rorschach, who was highly nervous, almost take out the plasma pistol and pull the trigger. However, the next second, the cold mechanical voice of Iron Man came into Rorschach's ears. Rorschach was stunned. There was no plan to take action for the time being. "Hello, oh Messiah?" For a moment, Rorschach, speechless, blinked his eyes desperately. Finally, he decided to tell the truth and be honest with Iron Man. "Hello, strange Iron Man, I am not the Messiah of Ohm, I am just an ordinary human." After listening to Rorschach's answer, Iron Man UR025 turned his metal head back and forth a few times. It seemed that he was adapting to the metal body that had just finished hibernation. It seemed that he shook his head and sighed because of Rorschach's answer. "I was lucky enough to meet the god of all machines when I was wandering in the universe. He is somewhat similar to you. Maybe it's because he just finished hibernation. I accidentally recognized the wrong person." Iron Man's cold mechanical voice gradually changed. It seemed to have more emotional fluctuations. However, Rorschach was about to continue communicating. The Iron Man in front of him suddenly raised his metal head. A faint blue light flashed in his eye sockets a few times. "This is not Terra, or even the universe of the past. In addition, I found some video materials related to you on the ancient information channel called the Internet. Then, a series of moving video images were projected from the Iron Man's eye sockets. They were displayed in front of Rorschach. That was the surveillance video of the past Rorschach, even if he tried his best to hide and dodge. There were always blind spots missed. As if he noticed the restlessness in Rorschach's heart, the Iron Man stopped projecting and bowed again. "Please rest assured that all information related to you has been completely deleted at this moment." The expressionless Rorschach suddenly swallowed his saliva. This time, he really got a treasure.
Thank you so much for listening. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the story, so please leave a comment below. And if you want more fanfiction audio, be sure to like and subscribe. See you in the next one.